Just started university, and my beautiful tutor turns out to be the mother of my child. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1676, The Slippery-Tongued Villain. Huh? Your wife is Zhang Yuxi. Zhang Yuxi heard the words and immediately showed a cute expression on her face, then looked at Lin Feng and said jokingly, "Ha, wife, you are so cute like this." "That's right. My wife is Zhang Yuxi. She is very, very beautiful, and also very, very naughty." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and touched her head, and couldn't help laughing. "Husband, are you praising me?" Zhang Yuxi heard the words and immediately asked excitedly. "Yes. My wife is the most beautiful and the cutest. Wife, do you know? You are unique in my mind." Lin Feng heard the words and hurriedly said. He looked at Zhang Yuxi's cute appearance and spoke gently. As he spoke, he couldn't help but lean over and kissed Zhang Yuxi's forehead. Zhang Yuxi heard the words and immediately covered her forehead and laughed. She looked at Lin Feng with a smile in her eyes. Her face was full of sweet smiles, and she looked very happy and joyful. "Wife, you are really my baby. You are the only one in my heart, and you are the baby I cherish the most. I will keep you in my heart for the rest of my life, and I will never leave you. No matter what difficulties and dangers you encounter, I will never leave you." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said with a firm face. Zhang Yuxi laughed when she heard it. She looked at Lin Feng, her heart was warm, her mouth corners raised, and her smile was very sweet. Her eyes were full of tenderness. At this moment, she felt like she owned the whole world. At this moment, she felt that she was the luckiest and happiest person in the world. She looked at Lin Feng, with a happy smile on her face, and her eyes were full of happiness. She looked at Lin Feng, her heart was full of love. "Husband, I believe in you. You are the best man in the world. Meeting you is my happiness." Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said very seriously, "Hey, I am indeed the best man in the world. I will protect you and will not let you get hurt. Wife, let me take care of you for the rest of your life, okay? As long as my wife needs me, I will be there at any time." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said very seriously, his face full of solemnity. He looked into Zhang Yuxi's eyes and looked at her seriously. Yes. Zhang Yuxi nodded and looked at Lin Feng, her eyes filled with a deep smile. She looked at Lin Feng, her heart filled with happiness. She looked at Lin Feng and was very satisfied. At this moment, she felt that her life was complete. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, her heart filled with deep emotion. Zhang Yuxi put down the things in her hands, raised her head, opened her arms and hugged Lin Feng tightly. She buried her head in Lin Feng's neck, her face pressed against Lin Feng's skin. She felt a warm breath emanating from Lin Feng's body, felt Lin Feng's breath. Zhang Yuxi's sudden action made Lin Feng's heart tremble violently. He was stunned for a moment, then stretched out his hands to wrap around Zhang Yuxi's waist, hugging Zhang Yuxi tightly. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, and his eyes also showed excitement. "Wife, are you inviting me?" He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said. While speaking, his eyes also showed a hint of expectation. It was a kind of desire unique to men. He felt a fragrance coming from Zhang Yuxi's body, and his heartbeat also accelerated. "Hey, what are you thinking about? What are you thinking about, you big bad guy?" Zhang Yuxi heard the words and immediately looked at Lin Feng with a shy face and said, "Pretend to be you. It's full of you. Wife, you are seducing me. You are seducing me. Wife, you are deliberately seducing me. Wife, you are so bad. I can't resist my wife's beauty." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, his face full of excitement. There was a blazing fire in his eyes. Looking at Zhang Yuxi, his heart was beating wildly, as if it was about to burst out of his throat. "Oh, you're annoying. I'm ignoring you. Slippery tongue. Big bad guy. Stinky hooligan." Zhang Yuxi glared at Lin Feng when she heard what he said, then turned her head away and ignored him. Her pretty face was full of blush, and her pink face looked very cute. She looked out the window and her heart became unusually quiet. "Okay, I won't tease you." Then, "Wife, what happened just now? Suddenly hugged me." Lin Feng stretched out his right hand, touched Zhang Yuxi's face, and said, I won't tell you, I won't tell you. I won't tell you, I won't tell you." Zhang Yuxi said with a naughty look on her face. "Wife, just tell me." "Wife, wife, wife." Please, please, please. My wife is the best. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said with a pitiful face. He looked very funny. He okay. I can't do anything about you. You're even better at acting like a spoiled child than a girl like me. Then I'll tell you. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng's pitiful face, and couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. Looking at Lin Feng's look, she felt it was very funny. She smiled at Lin Feng, and then said, because just now I suddenly had an idea, that is, I want to marry you immediately. This idea has always existed in my heart. I want to let the whole world know that I, Zhang Yuxi, already have a husband, and he is a very powerful husband. No one will dare to bully me in the future. Moreover, I want everyone in the world to know that I, Zhang Yuxi, am the happiest girl and the happiest wife. I want to give birth to a baby for you, a baby that belongs to both of us. I want to walk with you like this for the rest of my life. Until we grow old. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said seriously. There was a strong smile on her face, looking at Lin Feng, with a deep look on her face, and the words she said were also full of sincerity. I want to keep going with you, my wife. Wife, I love you. I will protect you with everything I have. I will never let you suffer any grievances. I will never let you suffer any harm again. You will always be my Lin Feng's most beloved wife. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said very seriously. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with tenderness in his eyes. Me too. I love you too. I love you the most. We must keep going, forever, and never separate. Hearing this, Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said seriously. The two looked at each other, and deep love was revealed in their eyes. There was only each other in their eyes, and there was no room for anything else. Chapter 1677. Isn't this seduction? This feeling made the two of them feel very wonderful. Zhang Yuxi stretched out her left hand and held Lin Feng's right hand, holding it tightly in her palm. She looked at Lin Feng with tenderness in her eyes. She looked at Lin Feng, the corners of her mouth slightly raised, revealing a bright smile. Hearing this, Lin Feng showed a gentle smile on his face. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, Wife, I promise you that when you reach the legal age of marriage, I will definitely give you a grand wedding and make you the happiest bride. I can marry the most beautiful and charming wife in the world, and I can build a family that belongs to the two of us. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, Yeah, me too. As long as I'm with you, nothing else matters. As long as it's you. Zhang Yuxi also smiled when she heard this. She looked at Lin Feng, and the smile on her face grew bigger and bigger. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and was also very happy in his heart. Although he and Zhang Yuxi were only engaged, he knew that in his heart he had already regarded Zhang Yuxi as his wife, and his only wife. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and the tenderness in his eyes became stronger. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a doting smile. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, and a happy smile appeared on his face. Wife, I love you. You are the woman I love most. You will always be my wife, Lin Feng. No matter what happens in the future, I, Lin Feng, will never betray you. I will never leave you. I will always love you, protect you and cherish you. You will always be my most beloved wife. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said seriously. He was not just talking casually. As long as he said something to Zhang Yuxi, he would definitely do it. When Zhang Yuxi heard these words from Lin Feng, her eyes also turned red. She looked at Lin Feng with emotion, and tears flowed down. She looked at Lin Feng and murmured to herself, Husband. Woo woo woo. It's so annoying, you moved me to tears again. Woo woo woo. It's as if we are having a wedding now. Say so many touching words. Woo woo woo. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng with red eyes and nose. She looked at Lin Feng with sobs. Seeing Zhang Yuxi crying, Lin Feng's heart tightened. He quickly raised his hand and wiped away Zhang Yuxi's tears. Wife, don't cry, I was wrong, I was wrong. I shouldn't say so many sensational words, please don't cry, okay? I'm sorry, wife, don't cry. My silly wife. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and gently wiped away her tears, and quickly coaxed Zhang Yuxi. Hearing this, Zhang Yuxi stopped crying. Looking at Lin Feng, her big eyes were still red, and there were a few tears on her face, which looked very cute. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, with deep tenderness in his eyes. His lips moved to Zhang Yuxi's mouth, ready to kiss Zhang Yuxi. HMPH. Hubby, I won't let you kiss me. I won't give it to you. Lululu. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng coming closer, and quickly stretched out her hand to cover Lin Feng's lips. She looked at Lin Feng and said with a mischievous face. Zhang Yuxi's little face was red, and she looked very cute. She looked at Lin Feng with a mischievous face, looking at Lin Feng's handsome face. Hey, wife, don't reject me. Lin Feng stretched out his right hand and grasped Zhang Yuxi's small hand, looking at Zhang Yuxi tenderly, and then spoke. Hearing Lin Feng's words, Zhang Yuxi's face turned red. Her face was flushed, and she looked particularly cute. You annoying guy, you just want to cheat. I don't want it. I just don't want it. Zhang Yuxi blushed when she heard Lin Feng's words, and she muttered. Her tone was charming and cute, and she looked very lovable. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, his mouth corners slightly raised, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, How did I cheat? It was obviously you, my wife, who seduced me first. I was so fascinated by you. Hey, it's all because my wife is too charming. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and there was a hint of ambiguity in his eyes. He raised the corners of his mouth slightly and spoke. How did I seduce you? How could I? You're talking nonsense. I hate it so much, you did it on purpose. Zhang Yuxi's eyes widened when she heard Lin Feng's words, and she asked with an unyielding expression. She looked very cute with her eyes wide open, and she looked very lovable. Looking at Zhang Yuxi like this, Lin Feng couldn't help but want to tease her. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, and said, Wife, you have it. Lin Feng's tone was overbearing, and his tone made Zhang Yuxi's cheeks slightly hot. When Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, her lips trembled slightly, and she didn't know how to refute. She stared at Lin Feng with wide eyes, looking unconvinced. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's appearance, and a smile appeared in his eyes. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, and said, Wife, you look at me, your eyes are staring at me, isn't this seduction? Zhang Yuxi blushed when she heard Lin Feng's words, and then lowered her head quickly. She didn't look into Lin Feng's eyes, lowered her head, and muttered to herself, You annoying guy, you only know how to bully me. Zhang Yuxi muttered, and two blushes appeared on her cheeks. Looking at Zhang Yuxi's shy look, Lin Feng's smile deepened. Wife, don't struggle. It's useless, just surrender. I won't let you run away. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, and the smile in his eyes deepened. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, and a wicked smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Wife, just obey me. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with burning eyes and spoke. Lin Feng's eyes were fixed on Zhang Yuxi without blinking. His burning eyes made Zhang Yuxi's cheeks redder and redder. When Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, her heart pounded as if it was going to jump out of her chest. Her heartbeat was very fast, and her cheeks became more and more rosy. She bit her lip and said, Oh, annoying, a nuisance. Her face was red and looked extremely cute. After she finished speaking, she turned her face to the other side, not daring to look at Lin Feng again. When Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words, his eyes sparkled. The smile on the corner of his mouth became deeper and deeper, and his eyes became even hotter. Chapter 1678, Big Bad Guy, You Are So Nice. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a wicked smile on his face. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said jokingly, Wife, you are agreeing, right? When Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said, her heart skipped a beat. She understood the meaning of Lin Feng's words and became even more shy. Husband, you. Zhang Yuxi wanted to explain something, but she didn't know what to say. For a moment, her mind was in a mess. Her heart was beating non-stop. Hey, my silly wife. Come on, wife. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's shy look and said with open arms. He looked at Zhang Yuxi's shy look with a smile on his face, and his heart was full of happiness. Big bad guy. You only know how to bully me all day long. Zhang Yuxi said, and turned around to run away. Seeing Zhang Yuxi turn around and run away, Lin Feng rushed up and blocked Zhang Yuxi's way. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, hugged Zhang Yuxi and picked her up. Zhang Yuxi was startled by Lin Feng's sudden action, and quickly hugged Lin Feng's neck. Her cheeks were as red as an apple, and there was a trace of panic in her eyes. She shouted, Big bad guy, let me go. Zhang Yuxi struggled, but Lin Feng held Zhang Yuxi and had no intention of letting go. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile in his eyes and said, I won't let go, I will hold you, and I will never let go. Humph, big bad guy, let me go, otherwise, I will ignore you. Zhang Yuxi said after hearing Lin Feng's words. Well, I won't let go even if you kill me. Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he said very domineeringly. Hearing Lin Feng's words, Zhang Yuxi's face became even redder. She looked at Lin Feng with a shy look on her face. She said, "You bad guy, I'm going to get angry. No matter what. I'm going to hold you and never let go. Hold you all the time. I'm going to hold my wife." When Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he spoke with a smile in his eyes. Then, he held Zhang Yuxi and sat down on the sofa in the living room. You are so shameless. HMPH, I don't want to bother with you." Hearing Lin Feng's rogue words, Zhang Yuxi had to give up resistance. She couldn't help but stay quietly in Lin Feng's arms. "Be good. Wife, don't move. Otherwise, you will suffer later." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said. While speaking, he did not forget to speak softly in Zhang Yuxi's ear. While speaking, he did not forget to reach out and pinch Zhang Yuxi's pink face. When Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said, her body stiffened and her face turned red. She looked at Lin Feng and uttered a soft moan. "HMPH. You are a hooligan." Zhang Yuxi pouted and said. Seeing Zhang Yuxi's coquettish look, Lin Feng chuckled. He hugged Zhang Yuxi's waist and rested his head on her shoulder, smelling her unique fragrance. Zhang Yuxi was hugged by Lin Feng, and she did not struggle, staying in Lin Feng's arms obediently. After Lin Feng hugged her for a while, he let go of Zhang Yuxi. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with a gentle smile on his face and said, "Wife, are you still angry with me?" "You? No." Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and shook her head. "I was not angry in the first place. It's all your fault, you have been bullying me," Zhang Yuxi said with a pout. Since she has been with Lin Feng, she has never really had a quarrel with Lin Feng. How could Zhang Yuxi bear to be angry with Lin Feng because of this matter? Lin Feng saw Zhang Yuxi shaking her head. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, with a smile in his eyes. He also knew how gentle and considerate Zhang Yuxi was in her daily life, so the anger that Zhang Yuxi said just now was just a way of acting coquettishly with him. Lin Feng also knew that Zhang Yuxi would never quarrel with him, let alone be angry with him. "Yes, so cute," Lin Feng said while looking at Zhang Yuxi. He reached out and rubbed Zhang Yuxi's hair. When Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said, she pouted and her cheeks became redder. Seeing Zhang Yuxi's action, the smile on Lin Feng's face became even more intense. He reached out and touched Zhang Yuxi's cheek with a smile in his eyes. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and slowly said, "Wife, I like you like this, really, very cute." After Lin Feng finished speaking, he lowered his head and kissed Zhang Yuxi's forehead. Zhang Yuxi blushed when she heard Lin Feng's words, but she did not avoid it. She looked at Lin Feng with a blush on her face, her lips slightly raised, and a smile in her eyes. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile on his lips, and his heart was also filled with a hint of happiness. Zhang Yuxi also felt very happy when she looked at Lin Feng. There were tears of happiness in her eyes. She looked at Lin Feng's cheek, with a hint of smile in her eyes, and whispered, "Big bad guy, you are so nice." Haha. Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's compliment and chuckled with a smile on his lips. "Do you think I'm okay now? Who wanted to run away just now?" Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile on his face. Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said. She pouted her lips and said with an unhappy look, "Humph, who wanted to do something bad to me just now? I don't want to pay attention to you. I'm going to run away, let's see what you can do," Zhang Yuxi said, with a hint of arrogance in her tone and a hint of complacency on her face. She looked at Lin Feng. What can I do with you? Then I won't let you go, and kiss you until you are willing to pay attention to me." Lin Feng heard what Zhang Yuxi said, and a sly smile appeared on his lips. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile in his eyes and a ruffian smile on his lips. "You big bad guy. Humph, I just don't want to pay attention to you." Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said, and she didn't forget to make faces at Lin Feng while she was talking. Lin Feng saw Zhang Yuxi's actions, and Lin Feng laughed even happier. He said, "Okay, if you ignore me, I will pay attention to you," Lin Feng said, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised, and then he kissed Zhang Yuxi's forehead again. "Oh, what are you doing?" Zhang Yuxi covered her forehead with a blush on her face, and said to Lin Feng with a hint of shyness in her tone. Chapter 1679, Don't be afraid. "Wife, what's wrong? I'm your man, I kiss my own woman, shouldn't I? I tell you, you are my wife, you can only be mine from now on, no one can take you away. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a strong expression. While speaking, he also straightened his chest and pretended to be strong. Husband. You are so annoying, Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, muttering in her mouth, with a hint of innocence in her tone. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's appearance, and he also felt a little pity in his heart. Wife, you are mine, no one can take you away. Lin Feng said with a firm look in his eyes. Well, I know, so I won't leave you. Zhang Yuxi nodded and said. There was a hint of tenderness in her eyes and a hint of smile at the corners of her mouth. That's good, you are mine, no one can take you away. Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words and said with a hint of domineering in his tone. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with a hint of tenderness in his eyes. Hubby, don't worry. I'll be your woman for the rest of my life. I only recognize you as my man. Zhang Yuxi said with a smile when she heard Lin Feng's words. There was a hint of coquettishness in her tone. After she finished speaking, she stuck out her tongue at Lin Feng. You girl. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's expression and a smile appeared on his lips. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile on his lips, and a hint of tenderness in his eyes. He said, do you dare to fancy other men? Not even a glance. If you dare to look, I'll spank you. Lin Feng smiled slightly and said with a domineering look on his face. HMPH. I'm not afraid. Lulu. Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's threat. Not only was she not afraid, but she also made a face at Lin Feng, with a hint of disdain in her tone and a hint of mischief in her eyes, looking at Lin Feng. You little wildcat. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's appearance and a hint of smile on his lips. There was tenderness in his eyes, a hint of doting, and a smile on the corner of his mouth. I'm going to spank you. Lin Feng stretched out his hand and slapped Zhang Yuxi's butt a few times. Ah. It hurts. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng spanking her butt, and she let out a cry. There was a trace of grievance on her pretty face. She looked at Lin Feng and said, you big bad guy, you actually spanked me. Woo woo woo. You bullied me again. Zhang Yuxi said this with an expression of grievance on her face and a hint of crying in her mouth. Seeing Zhang Yuxi's aggrieved look, Lin Feng couldn't help but soften his heart. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with a trace of heartache on his face. Lin Feng hugged Zhang Yuxi in his arms. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, his eyes full of tenderness, and said with a hint of tenderness, wife, are you still so naughty? Humph. How can I be naughty? Woo woo woo. You just love to bully me. Zhang Yuxi pretended to be very aggrieved, and said to Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's cute expression, and he couldn't help laughing. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, with a hint of pampering in his mouth, and said, you are not naughty? You are the most naughty. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng. There was also a hint of grievance on her face, a hint of mist in her eyes, and a hint of coquettishness in her mouth. Woo woo woo. You are still laughing at me. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, with a hint of pampering in the corners of his mouth, and a hint of heartache in his eyes. He said, silly, why are you still crying? Humph. Zhang Yuxi still had some mist in her eyes when she heard Lin Feng's words. But she raised her head stubbornly, with a hint of pride on her face and a hint of complacency in her mouth, and said, Humph. Who told you to laugh at me? Who told you to bully me? Who told you to hit my ass? Zhang Yuxi said. She clenched her fists tightly, and then waved them in the air a few times, pretending to vent her anger, but the fists in her hands did not fall on Lin Feng. Okay, I was wrong, isn't it okay? My dear wife, I was wrong, okay? My dear wife, you are generous, don't bother with me, okay? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's lovely appearance, and he also had a smile on his lips, looking at Zhang Yuxi and speaking. When Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said, the corners of her mouth slightly raised, with a hint of cunning in her eyes, and a hint of smile on her lips. Is this your attitude? Humph. What do you mean you were wrong, isn't it okay? What? You are not convinced in your heart, are you? Hearing this, Zhang Yuxi said proudly. She looked at Lin Feng with a hint of provocation in her eyes. No. I don't mean that. Lin Feng just finished speaking. What's wrong with you? Zhang Yuxi asked. She looked at Lin Feng with a smile on her face. I just think. Why are you so cute? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, chuckled, and said to Zhang Yuxi. Every time he saw Zhang Yuxi being naughty in his eyes, he really felt that she was very cute. He hoped that Zhang Yuxi could continue to be so naughty and maintain her innocence. He would also always protect the childish side of Zhang Yuxi. Lin Feng only hoped that Zhang Yuxi could be happy forever. Huh? I'm not cute. Zhang Yuxi was immediately unhappy when she heard Lin Feng say that she was cute. She looked at Lin Feng and said with a hint of dissatisfaction. Are you changing the subject? Hubby, you've changed now. Woo woo woo. You don't love me that much anymore. Zhang Yuxi came up with an idea, and said to Lin Feng with a crying voice. As Zhang Yuxi spoke, her tears fell. Her eyes were red, and she looked very lovable, making people want to hug her. Wife, be good, dear. I have always loved you the most, don't you believe me? Silly, how could your husband not love you that much? My love will never change, never. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and quickly comforted her. He quickly hugged Zhang Yuxi in his arms, and said with a hint of tenderness, Silly wife, I will always love you. Really? Zhang Yuxi's expression changed immediately when she heard Lin Feng say this. She looked at Lin Feng with a smile in her eyes. Of course, why would I lie to you? Okay, my good wife, don't be sad, okay? I was wrong, I shouldn't have bullied you just now. It's all your husband's fault, wife, you can do whatever you want, okay? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a gentle smile on his face, and he looked at Zhang Yuxi and said. Chapter 1680 Zhang Yuxi has become a bad person. Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said. She raised her head and looked at Lin Feng, with a slight smile on her lips. There was a hint of smirk on her lips, and there was a hint of teasing in her eyes. She said with a hint of tenderness, Then how do I want to punish you? Just tell me, husband, I will agree to everything you say. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's charming appearance, and he couldn't help but sigh that Zhang Yuxi's beauty was so amazing. Her pretty face, her eyes, her nose, and her delicate cherry mouth all revealed a kind of seductive breath. Lin Feng had long seen through Zhang Yuxi's acting skills and little thoughts just now. Zhang Yuxi just wanted to tease her deliberately. Lin Feng understood everything. But he still didn't expose Zhang Yuxi's little tricks. Let this woman he loved be naughty. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng with a smile on her lips, her eyes rolling around, and a hint of smirk on her lips. Honey, you just said that I can do whatever I want. Then I should think about how to punish you. Zhang Yuxi rolled her eyes and pretended to think. As she spoke, she looked at Lin Feng with a smile. Lin Feng was stared at by Zhang Yuxi's provocative eyes, and he felt numb all over. He was also a normal man, and a man full of vigor, so his reaction to Zhang Yuxi's actions was normal. Lin Feng's heart suddenly became hot. His heart was beating violently, as if it was about to jump out of his mouth. His eyes also became hot, looking at Zhang Yuxi, with a smile in his eyes. Zhang Yuxi also noticed the change in Lin Feng, and her heart trembled. She looked at Lin Feng, and the corners of her mouth rose slightly. Honey, what do you want? Just say it. I will satisfy you. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said. Honey, then I want. Zhang Yuxi said. There was a hint of teasing in her mouth, and a smirk on her lips as she looked at Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's appearance, and his heart was shocked. His breathing became unnatural. He swallowed his saliva. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, Wife, tell me. Husband. Zhang Yuxi pretended to be shy and looked at Lin Feng. As she spoke, her voice became lower. Her face flushed slightly, and she lowered her head and dared not look at Lin Feng. Wife, you have learned bad things. Lin Feng called Zhang Yuxi with a low and hoarse voice. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, and his heart was also throbbing. Husband, how could I learn bad things? Zhang Yuxi looked up at Lin Feng with an innocent look. There was a shy expression on her face, which made her look more charming and more seductive. There was a hint of charm in her eyes. Wife, were you teasing me just now? You girl, are so bad. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and asked with a smirk on his lips. Zhang Yuxi had a smile on her lips and did not answer Lin Feng's words. She looked at Lin Feng with a sly look in her eyes. I'm not. How dare I tease you? You are the only one who can tease me. Zhang Yuxi said, looking at Lin Feng with a smile on her lips. Then tell me, how do you want to punish me? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and asked with a puzzled look in his eyes. I won't tell you, just guess it yourself. When Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said, her eyes flashed slightly, and she looked at Lin Feng with a sly smile on her lips. You annoying little goblin. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and his heart was helpless. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with a bitter smile on his face. He knew that he had been taken advantage of by Zhang Yuxi. Think about it quickly. If you can't think of it, then I will punish you in my own way. Lin Feng smiled evilly and said quickly. You. How can you do this? It was me who wanted to punish you. How come you are the one punishing me? Zhang Yuxi frowned slightly when she heard Lin Feng say this, and she spoke with an innocent look. Zhang Yuxi's voice was a little coquettish, which made people tremble. Who told you to tease me first? I am taking revenge now, but you are not allowed to resist. It's much more interesting to punish her in my way. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a wicked smile on his face. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, and he was not in a hurry to succeed, but just spoke slowly. You. Aren't you afraid of draining you dry? Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, and she had a shy smile on her face, and her face was slightly hot. She bit her lips lightly, looked at Lin Feng, and her heart was also flustered. She also knew that she was deliberately teasing Lin Feng this time. She was also learning from Lin Feng, who told him to tease her all the time. Lin Feng is so smart. He must have guessed that she was teasing him on purpose, so he now said in disguise that he would punish himself in his way. Ha 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 ha. Lin Feng burst into laughter when he heard Zhang Yuxi's words. What are you laughing at? Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, with a hint of shyness on her face. She didn't know why she was shy. She looked at Lin Feng and asked with a hint of reproach on her face. You are really too naughty. I am almost tormented to death by you. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a hint of smile in his eyes, and he spoke. His hands tightly hugged Zhang Yuxi's waist. Zhang Yuxi also turned away when Lin Feng hugged her like this. She looked up at Lin Feng with a hint of shyness on her face. She also reached out to hug Lin Feng's neck. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's appearance with a hint of ambiguity in his eyes. He moved his head closer to Zhang Yuxi. Wife? Lin Feng called gently. Zhang Yuxi responded softly. Okay, I won't tease you anymore. Lin Feng raised the corners of his mouth slightly, and spoke in a deep and affectionate voice. When Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said, her ears instantly turned red. She wanted to find a crack in the ground to crawl into. You. Zhang Yuxi didn't know what to say for a moment. She suddenly lost the ability to express herself. Huh? What's wrong with me? Wife, what's wrong with me? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a wicked smile on his face. Zhang Yuxi lowered her head shyly when she was looked at by Lin Feng's seductive eyes. Why? She was just about to bring up this topic. She was so shy at this moment. She really wanted to find a crack in the ground to crawl into. She just now. Why did she bring up this topic? This gave Lin Feng another chance to tease her. Chapter 1681 Legitimate Defense. Zhang Yuxi stared at Lin Feng with her eyes wide open, with a coquettish expression on her lips, looking shy. Her fair face was now stained with a layer of blush. Humph, who would believe you? You are so annoying. There was also a hint of shyness in Zhang Yuxi's voice. Her hand was also placed on Lin Feng's shoulder. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and her little face was pink. Oh. Wife doesn't believe it. Wife, you actually don't believe me. Wife, then you try it. If you try it, you will know if what I said is true. Lin Feng raised his eyebrows, looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile and said. Hateful, who wants to try it? You stinky hooligan. Shameless. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng shyly, scolding Lin Feng while punching Lin Feng with her fists, hitting Lin Feng's body again and again. My wife hit me again. Lin Feng was hit by Zhang Yuxi several times, and he also looked aggrieved, but there was a hint of joy in his eyes. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, with a hint of doting in his voice. Zhang Yuxi saw Lin Feng's look, and looked at Lin Feng with a hint of unwillingness to admit defeat. I am a stinky hooligan. I am still a bad guy. I am still your husband. Lin Feng was not angry at Zhang Yuxi's words that he was a hooligan. He still looked at Zhang Yuxi with a doting face. Hateful. I can't argue with you. I will ignore you. Zhang Yuxi heard the words and immediately hammered Lin Feng's chest and said. It hurts. Lin Feng screamed when he was hammered. Wife, how can you bear to hit me? Lin Feng pretended to be innocent and said. Huh? Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng with a hint of pride on her face. Ouch. It hurts so much? Lin Feng said while rubbing his chest and looking at Zhang Yuxi. You deserve it. Who told you to bully me? Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said. Who told you to be so naughty, my wife? It was you who teased me first. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, looking at her with a wronged face. When Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said, the corners of her mouth twitched slightly. She looked at Lin Feng and said, "Huh? Who told you to tease me all the time? I'm just defending myself." "Wife?" Lin Feng pouted. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with a wronged face. He was like a child who had been wronged, which made people laugh. Zhang Yuxi's face was slightly red when she was looked at by Lin Feng. Sure enough, when a man in love starts to act like a spoiled child, there is nothing a woman can do. Zhang Yuxi thought to herself. "Wife, look at me." Lin Feng reached out and took Zhang Yuxi's hand, looked at Zhang Yuxi, and said seriously. "Wife?" Lin Feng kept staring at Zhang Yuxi. Zhang Yuxi's cheeks became even redder when she was stared at by Lin Feng, and she didn't dare to look at Lin Feng. "Wife?" Lin Feng continued to look at Zhang Yuxi and started to act like a spoiled child. "Stinky egg. Don't yell." Zhang Yuxi couldn't resist Lin Feng's temptation after all. She stretched out her right hand and covered Lin Feng's mouth, and her eyes looked away. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's shy appearance and a smile appeared on his face. He stretched out his left hand and gently patted Zhang Yuxi's head. Zhang Yuxi's face became even redder after being patted on the head by Lin Feng, and her eyes rolled around. "Humph, I won't pay attention to you." After Zhang Yuxi finished speaking, she wanted to get up and leave. However, how could Lin Feng let Zhang Yuxi leave? He had already made preparations. He took a step and stopped Zhang Yuxi. "Ah, what do you want to do?" Zhang Yuxi saw Lin Feng stopping her, and she quickly asked. "Wife, I want to hug you." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said seriously, with a hint of domineering and threatening tone in his voice. "I don't want to hug you." Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, and she shook her head proudly to refuse. "No." Lin Feng shook his head, refusing with a domineering and resolute face. Then he directly pulled Zhang Yuxi into his arms. "Huh?" Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng's resolute look, and she could only snort. She did not resist, and let Lin Feng hug her, and the two sat down on the sofa. Zhang Yuxi leaned in Lin Feng's arms, her heart pounding, and her hands also grabbed Lin Feng's arms. Lin Feng's arms tightly embraced Zhang Yuxi. He closed his eyes and smelled the fragrance emanating from Zhang Yuxi's hair. "Huh?" Lin Feng took a deep breath and felt the fragrance emanating from Zhang Yuxi. This was Zhang Yuxi's unique smell. "Wife, be good. Let me hug you quietly for a while." Lin Feng hugged Zhang Yuxi tightly and spoke gently. Lin Feng felt that this fragrance was very pleasant, making people feel comfortable all over, and this fragrance made him relax. Every time he quietly hugged Zhang Yuxi, he felt particularly at ease. He also knew that Zhang Yuxi would not betray him, so he did not have to worry about Zhang Yuxi being with other men. He knew that they only had each other in their eyes, so he was not afraid that Zhang Yuxi would run away secretly. He was just a little wife slave now, and he just wanted to stay by his wife's side and protect her forever. Lin Feng hugged Zhang Yuxi, and neither of them spoke. They just sat on the sofa and kept this posture. Zhang Yuxi did not speak either. She closed her eyes and leaned on Lin Feng's arms. Her heart was also full of sweetness and happiness. This was the happiness she wanted. When she was with Lin Feng, her heart would always be sweet. And Lin Feng also took good care of her in every way. She felt very happy, which was why she felt that meeting Lin Feng was the luckiest thing. She did not want to lose him. No matter what he did wrong, she did not want Lin Feng to leave her, and she did not want to see Lin Feng leave her. "Wife, you smell so good." Lin Feng suddenly raised his head and looked at Zhang Yuxi's face and said. Zhang Yuxi's face immediately turned red after Lin Feng said that. She lowered her head and said nothing, but her face became redder and redder. Her heartbeat was also getting faster and faster. "Hey, wife, your face is as red as an apple. Are you shy?" Lin Feng saw that Zhang Yuxi's face was red. He was also a little excited. He didn't expect that his words would make Zhang Yuxi laugh. "How can I be shy, huh?" Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said. She looked up at Lin Feng, pouted, and looked unhappy. Chapter 1682 Together Forever. My wife is most beautiful when she blushes. When Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words, he also stretched out his right hand, gently pinched Zhang Yuxi's nose, and said, "You." Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words. She wanted to scold Lin Feng for his sweet talk, but when she saw Lin Feng's handsome face, she couldn't say it. "Haha, wife." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's expression, and he couldn't help laughing. "Bad guy, you're still laughing." Zhang Yuxi stretched out her right hand and gently pinched Lin Feng. "Ah." Lin Feng didn't expect Zhang Yuxi to pinch him. He couldn't help but exclaimed. I'm going to pinch you. Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's exclamation, and she laughed even harder. She didn't know why she liked to bully Lin Feng, and she also liked this feeling. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng's appearance, and her mood became much better. Humph. Wife, you are so mean. How can you be so cruel to me? Seeing Zhang Yuxi's smug look, Lin Feng shook his head helplessly, but there was still a faint smile on his face. He stretched out his hand and scratched Zhang Yuxi's nose. Haha. Zhang Yuxi's mood became better after Lin Feng scratched her nose, and she also laughed happily. You laughed. Seeing Zhang Yuxi's smile, Lin Feng was also a little obsessed. Of course. Happy. This time it's my turn to bully you. Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words and hurriedly said with a smile. Ah. Bully. Wife, can you bear it? Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words and smiled and said. What do you think? Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words. She raised her eyebrows, she looked at Lin Feng, smiled, and a cunning light flashed in her eyes. Wife, you can't bear it. Lin Feng said with a wicked smile. Because he knew Zhang Yuxi too well, she always looked fierce and wanted to bully him, but she couldn't bear it in the end. Who said that? Of course I'm willing to, and I'm very willing to. I'm going to bite you. Zhang Yuxi also had a stubborn expression when she heard Lin Feng's words, and she also raised her neck and spoke. Bite it. It doesn't matter if my wife's marks are all over my body. Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words, he nodded, and a smile appeared on his face. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng's expression that deserved to be beaten. She also narrowed her eyes slightly, and then pounced on Lin Feng, and the two of them also started to play. Ah, my wife really bites. You want to murder your husband? I'm going to call the police. Lin Feng dodged and shouted. Zhang Yuxi was also amused by Lin Feng. Her cheeks were red, and her eyes were also shining. He. Zhang Yuxi laughed. Wife, are you born in the year of the cat? Why do you love to laugh so much? My wife who loves to laugh. Lin Feng said with a doting look on her face. Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said, and she also smiled and said, I am born in the year of the cat, and I am also a female cat. Meow meow master, I'm here. Zhang Yuxi mischievously imitated the cat's meow and fell into Lin Feng's arms. Pudgy. Hearing Zhang Yuxi's words, Lin Feng couldn't help laughing. Haha, wife, you are so cute. Ha ha ha, so cute. You are really a little goblin who bothers people. Such a cute little cat, come and hug the master. Lin Feng also looked at Zhang Yuxi with a doting look on his face, stretched out his arms and hugged Zhang Yuxi tightly into his arms. Meow yeah master is so nice. Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said, and she also said happily. Wife, you are so cute. Hee. My little cat will always follow the master from now on. Lin Feng also said with a doting look on his face. He really loves Zhang Yuxi more and more now. If he can continue to pamper her like this, he is willing. Meow. Yes, master. Zhang Yuxi rubbed her head against Lin Feng's shoulder when she heard what Lin Feng said, and a happy smile appeared in her eyes. My little cat is so good. They say cats are especially attached to their owners. My wife should always stick to me. Lin Feng smiled and said. Lin Feng felt a warmth coming from his shoulder, and his eyes were full of tenderness. His palm was also stroking Zhang Yuxi's hair. He also felt that such a life was really happy. He felt that as long as Zhang Yuxi was by his side, he already had the whole world. With Zhang Yuxi by his side, his heart became particularly stable. I'm not attached to you. I'm even more attached than super glue. Zhang Yuxi saw Lin Feng's gentle eyes, and she was also a little shy. She buried her face in Lin Feng's arms, with a happy smile on her lips. My little cat is a big fool. Lin Feng laughed when he heard Zhang Yuxi's words. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and his heart was filled with sweetness. I am a fool, I will rely on you. Zhang Yuxi also raised her head and said with a smile. There was a smile in her eyes. She also put her face on Lin Feng's chest. Listening to Lin Feng's heartbeat, she felt very satisfied in her heart, and felt that the happiest thing in her life was to meet this man, Lin Feng. She was also very glad that she met Lin Feng. Okay, rely on me. I like you to rely on me. I love it if you rely on me for the rest of my life. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said with a smile. Okay, then I will rely on you forever. I like you to rely on me, and I also like you to rely on me. Zhang Yuxi pouted and said, "My silly wife, how can you be so cute?" Lin Feng couldn't help pinching Zhang Yuxi's cheek, and he said with a doting look. Sometimes Lin Feng couldn't help wanting to bite Zhang Yuxi when he saw her very cute appearance. "I'm your wife. If I'm not cute, who else can be cute?" Zhang Yuxi said proudly when she heard Lin Feng's praise. "Well, yes. My wife is the cutest." Lin Feng also said with a smile. "Hey. Of course." Zhang Yuxi also giggled, and her laughter spread throughout the living room. When Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's laughter, a smile appeared on his face. "Husband, I love you." Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said, "My wife loves me too, and I love you too, and we will be together forever." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, "Forever and ever. Then I'll rely on you." Zhang Yuxi said with a smile when she heard Lin Feng's words. She also moved closer to Lin Feng's arms and buried her head in his arms. Chapter 1683, Full Sense of Security. "Well, you have to rely on me. Forever and ever, you said." Lin Feng hugged Zhang Yuxi tightly and said, "Well, forever and ever. Forever and ever, forever and ever. Forever and ever. Forever and ever." The two of them leaned on each other and told each other the love words in their hearts. The scene of the two joking and laughing was very warm. "Honey, what time is it now?" Zhang Yuxi lay in Lin Feng's arms and asked. 12:09, what's wrong? Lin Feng picked up the phone and took a look and said, "Oh, nothing, I wonder if they are awake. It's noon, and no one has woken up yet." Zhang Yuxi said. "Lauer and the others drank a lot of wine last night, and they are all drunk. They played very late, and they are probably still sleeping with their heads covered." Lin Feng said with a smile. "Well, then let's not wake them up, let them sleep until they wake up naturally. My girlfriends can sleep well too." Zhang Yuxi scratched her hair and said, "Hey. That's right. My wife can sleep well too. Like a little lazy pig, she always likes to kick the quilt when she sleeps." Hearing this, Lin Feng scratched Zhang Yuxi's nose and said with a doting look, "Ouch, how could I kick the quilt? I'm very honest when I sleep, aren't I?" Zhang Yuxi saw Lin Feng scratching her nose, and she immediately covered her nose and said. She also pouted her lips, looking pitiful. "Hey. You are not honest, you always kick the quilt. And you stretch your legs out and put them on me from time to time. My wife is especially cute even when she is sleeping." Lin Feng also said. He looked at Zhang Yuxi's eyes, which were also filled with deep love. "Hate it, I was just careless." When Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said, she also lowered her head a little embarrassedly and said like a spoiled child, "Well, I'm not that kind of stingy man. You can put your feet on my belly. I often sleep with my wife's feet on my belly." Lin Feng saw Zhang Yuxi's shy look, and he smiled and said, "Hate it." Zhang Yuxi lowered her head shyly when she heard Lin Feng's words, and she didn't dare to look at Lin Feng. "Every time my wife moves around in her sleep, it's just torturing me. I have spent countless nights in patience. It's really too annoying." Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words and said with a wry smile. However, his heart was also filled with rich happiness and sweetness. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with love. Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng meant, and her face suddenly turned red. How could I? I was sleeping. I didn't know." Zhang Yuxi also looked at Lin Feng coquettishly and said, "So, I'm almost tortured to death. I want it but I can't." Lin Feng smiled evilly, pinched Zhang Yuxi's face and said, "Hate you. I won't pay attention to you." Zhang Yuxi was pinched by Lin Feng a few times, and her face was flushed. She also punched Lin Feng's chest with her pink fist and said. Her pink fist did not have any killing power, but in Lin Feng's heart, it was full of strange and wonderful feelings. Lin Feng's arms also hugged Zhang Yuxi's waist tightly, and then hugged Zhang Yuxi into his arms. Lin Feng enjoyed the time alone with Zhang Yuxi. With a familiar taste, his heart would be very at ease. Of course. Zhang Yuxi is the same. As long as she is with Lin Feng, she feels safe. "Wife, I'm hungry." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said gently. What did you say? Didn't I just have breakfast at 10 o'clock? Are you hungry again?" Zhang Yuxi heard this. She also looked at Lin Feng with wide eyes and said, "Well, I'm hungry, very hungry." Lin Feng nodded, and said with a wrong expression. Then I'll get you something to eat, okay? Eat something to fill your stomach first, and then we'll go eat when they get up." Zhang Yuxi frowned when she heard this, and looked at Lin Feng and said. Then she was about to get out of Lin Feng's arms. Wife? Lin Feng held Zhang Yuxi's hand and refused to let go. Husband, what's wrong? I want to get up and get you something to eat. Didn't you say you were very hungry? Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng's unwillingness to let go of her hand, smiled and said. No. I'm not hungry. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's pretty face and said. His Adam's apple also rolled slightly. Lin Feng stared at Zhang Yuxi with a smile on his face. Well, not hungry. Zhang Yuxi's round eyes turned. What? Not hungry? What is it? This big bad guy. He actually acted like a hooligan. You. Zhang Yuxi said as she poked Lin Feng's chest with her finger. What about me? Wife, I'm just hungry. I don't care. Lin Feng hugged Zhang Yuxi and said coquettishly and domineeringly. No. You're so naughty, you want to tease me again. Zhang Yuxi heard the words and pouted. She also started to poke Lin Feng's chest relentlessly. Wife, you're so mean. You don't even care if I'm hungry. Wife, you don't love me, you don't feel sorry for me. Lin Feng hugged Zhang Yuxi and pretended to look pitiful and said. Big bad guy. Who doesn't love you? This is two different things, okay? Zhang Yuxi saw Lin Feng's pitiful look, and she softened her heart a little. After all, as long as she saw Lin Feng acting coquettishly and cute, she couldn't help but soften her heart. Her personality has always been like this. Hey, honey, didn't you say that if you love me, you have to love me? So, honey, I'm hungry. Seeing Zhang Yuxi softening, Lin Feng spoke up, with a hint of temptation in his tone. Zhang Yuxi hesitated. Her eyes softened as she looked at Lin Feng. She looked at Lin Feng's handsome face. She really lost to him. Sometimes he was like a rogue, a big bastard. Wife? Look, I'm starving. Hearing this, Lin Feng grabbed Zhang Yuxi's little hand. What? Plop. Plop. Zhang Yuxi felt her heartbeat getting faster and faster. Her pretty face turned red. Her eyes became watery, as if she was showing her affection, and those eyes made Lin Feng distracted. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 1684, Full Blood Resurrection. Zhang Yuxi quickly took her hand away. Her pretty face flushed, and her eyes flickered with shyness. Wife, I didn't lie to you, did I? I'm really hungry. Lin Feng stared at Zhang Yuxi and said. Oh. I hate it. Zhang Yuxi said shyly. Wife? Seeing Zhang Yuxi's look, Lin Feng called gently in her ear. Big bad guy. Zhang Yuxi twisted her shoulders, trying to escape from Lin Feng's clutches. Wife, don't move. Lin Feng said hoarsely. His big hand grabbed Zhang Yuxi's shoulder. Don't move. Don't move, dear. Lin Feng's body trembled slightly. He spoke to Zhang Yuxi in a low and hoarse voice. Hearing this, Zhang Yuxi immediately lay in Lin Feng's arms obediently without moving. This big bad guy always makes her heart ripple. It makes her heart become a little restless. Lin Feng saw that Zhang Yuxi had settled down. He also stretched out his right hand and placed it under Zhang Yuxi's little head. Zhang Yuxi hummed softly, and also leaned her head on Lin Feng's arm, then closed her eyes, and fell asleep in a short while. Lin Feng looked down at the sleeping Zhang Yuxi, and he also smiled dotingly, then lowered his head and kissed the top of Zhang Yuxi's head. This silly girl. He looked at Zhang Yuxi sleeping soundly, and he couldn't help but reach out and touch Zhang Yuxi's hair. His hand gently stroked Zhang Yuxi's hair, feeling Zhang Yuxi's long eyelashes, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He liked to touch Zhang Yuxi's hair. Because her hair was very soft and smooth, it felt like silk and fragrant to the touch. This woman always makes me unable to resist. Lin Feng thought to himself. I really want to tie you to my side and never leave you for the rest of my life. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with tenderness in his eyes, and he also whispered softly. Suddenly, the sleeping Zhang Yuxi hummed again and moved in Lin Feng's arms. Her head rested on Lin Feng's arm, and she curled up into a ball. Lin Feng let Zhang Yuxi turn over at will, and helped her clean her hair from time to time. Lin Feng felt the warmth and softness of Zhang Yuxi, and he couldn't help but smile softly. Then, He slowly put his hands on Zhang Yuxi's back and gently scratched her back. Zhang Yuxi's sleeping posture was very comfortable, like a lazy cat. Lin Feng's hands kept kneading her back, and Zhang Yuxi also felt comfortable and moaned comfortably. "You girl." Hearing Zhang Yuxi's moaning, Lin Feng couldn't help but said with some distress. His breathing also became a little rapid. "What an annoying little devil. If you wake up later, I'll punish you." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's cheek and said softly. Zhang Yuxi seemed to smell the scent of Lin Feng in her sleep. She couldn't help but reach out her hand, hugged Lin Feng's neck, and hugged Lin Feng tightly. Lin Feng smelled the faint fragrance coming from Zhang Yuxi, and a desire rose in his heart, but he still held it back. He went to bed late last night and got up early today, so he wanted Zhang Yuxi to take a rest at noon. "Good girl." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi in his arms and said to himself softly. Zhang Yuxi rubbed against Lin Feng's arms, and then continued to fall into deep sleep. Lin Feng's mouth corners also rose slightly. "I really hope. Just hold you like this, never let go. My baby. My little princess." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said in a low voice. "Wife, do you know how much I miss you? Even if you are by my side every day, I still think about you every day. I love you so much." Lin Feng said softly while looking at Zhang Yuxi in his arms. His eyes became deeper, and his face showed a warm expression. Zhang Yuxi felt Lin Feng's warm breath spraying on her neck, and her body trembled. Her eyelashes trembled slightly, and then she slowly opened her eyes. She saw that she was being held in Lin Feng's arms. His face was very close to hers. She could even see that Lin Feng's eyelashes were clearly visible, and his eyes, as black jade, were so clear and bright. "I love you too," Zhang Yuxi said in a daze in Lin Feng's arms. She also hugged Lin Feng's neck with both hands, then closed her eyes and fell asleep again. Looking at Zhang Yuxi falling asleep, Lin Feng also smiled dotingly, and he stretched out his hand to scratch Zhang Yuxi's nose. Her eyelashes fluttered gently, and she looked very beautiful and attractive. "This silly girl." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said softly. He hugged Zhang Yuxi and slowly fell asleep. Zhang Yuxi is a good girl. She deserves everyone's love, and deserves others to love her with all their strength, and she is also his beloved. Time passed quickly. In a blink of an eye, it was more than 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Lin Feng woke up. He opened his eyes, but found that Zhang Yuxi was still sleeping in his arms. He did not wake Zhang Yuxi, but looked at Zhang Yuxi quietly. Looking at Zhang Yuxi's peaceful sleeping face, Lin Feng also felt a strong sense of happiness in his heart. He felt that at this moment, he was the happiest man in the world. He reached out and gently lifted the hair on Zhang Yuxi's forehead to the side, and then helped Zhang Yuxi straighten her hair. Zhang Yuxi felt the itch coming from her cheek, and she couldn't help but let out a soft moan. "Honey, are you awake?" Lin Feng asked with a smile when he heard Zhang Yuxi's voice. After he finished speaking, Zhang Yuxi slowly woke up. She opened her eyes and saw Lin Feng. She couldn't help but smile sweetly. She didn't know how long she had been lying in Lin Feng's arms, nor how long she had slept. Yet, Zhang Yuxi nodded. She also stretched out her hand, hugged Lin Feng's neck and said, "Honey, how long have I slept?" "Not long, just 2 hours. Are you still sleepy?" Lin Feng also said with a smile. "Full-blood resurrection. Not sleepy anymore," Zhang Yuxi said with a smile. Lin Feng's palm was also on Zhang Yuxi's back, patting gently. Chapter 1685 I had a sweet dream. Zhang Yuxi's arms were around Lin Feng's neck. She leaned her face in front of Lin Feng, looked into his eyes and said, "Hubby, I had a dream." "Oh? What dream?" Lin Feng couldn't help but be a little confused, and he asked with a smile. "I dreamed that we were on a hillside, we were kissing on a stone, and there was a big peach tree on a tree, with red fruits on it. And I heard you say you love me." Zhang Yuxi said as she stretched out her hand, drew a circle in the air, and then said, "There is also a peach on a tree, and there are many flowers. Oh, yes, there is also a cat and a dog." As Zhang Yuxi spoke, she drew circles in the air, as if she was weaving a beautiful pattern. Seeing Zhang Yuxi like this, Lin Feng also laughed, and he stretched out his hand and gently stroked Zhang Yuxi's hair. "There are many more." As Zhang Yuxi spoke, she waved her hand again, drew a circle in the air, and her face was filled with a happy smile. "Wife, do you like dogs and cats?" Lin Feng asked with a smile. Of course I do. They are so cute. Zhang Yuxi answered immediately when she heard Lin Feng's question. Then let's find some time to go and see, and buy dogs and cats to raise them. Lin Feng said with a smile. He knew that Zhang Yuxi liked dogs and cats very much, so he suggested raising dogs and cats. Really? That's great. I also want a dog and a cat. Zhang Yuxi said happily. She also stretched out her hands to hug Lin Feng, with an excited face. Yes. Lin Feng nodded, and his eyes looking at Zhang Yuxi were also full of tenderness. The villa is big, my wife can raise whatever she wants. When the time comes, I will arrange the time and we will go to buy it back. Lin Feng said very dotingly. Okay. Yes, so happy. Zhang Yuxi nodded happily. There was also a smile in her eyes, and she looked infinitely happy. Then, husband. Zhang Yuxi raised her head and looked at Lin Feng, looking very pitiful. What's wrong? Lin Feng also asked with a smile. He also reached out and pinched Zhang Yuxi's cheek. Then when are we going to buy it? Zhang Yuxi said with a blushing face. Well, wait until the final exam is over, okay? It will be in the next week, I'll take you there then. Lin Feng thought for a while and said. Okay, then I just have time to prepare some things for cats and dogs. This is my first time raising a cat, too, and I don't understand some things, so I have to do some strategy. Zhang Yuxi said excitedly. Well, okay. Lin Feng nodded and reached out to rub Zhang Yuxi's head. Husband, you are so nice. You can satisfy me in everything. I'm so happy. Zhang Yuxi said in Lin Feng's arms, hugging Lin Feng's waist tightly. Lin Feng smiled, he lowered his head and kissed Zhang Yuxi's forehead, then said, I also feel so lucky. Zhang Yuxi saw the happiness in Lin Feng's eyes. She nodded and said with a smile, Thank you, husband. Lin Feng also smiled and shook his head, then said, You're welcome, my wife deserves the best. Zhang Yuxi's face showed a happy smile, and then leaned on Lin Feng's chest, and the two hugged each other tightly. Silly. Lin Feng called dotingly. The two of them stayed on the sofa for a long time. Wife, are you hungry? Lin Feng looked at the time and asked. After all, he just made some breakfast for Zhang Yuxi this morning. It was already 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and she was worried that Zhang Yuxi was hungry. And now Chen Kun, Su Hui, Chen Dongjin, those guys have not woken up yet, and even Zhang Yuxi's girlfriends have not moved. It seems that they played too crazy last night, and they are tired, right? I'm fine. Not really hungry. They sleep so well. It's already 3 o'clock and they haven't gotten up yet. My little sisters sleep so well too. Zhang Yuxi shook her head and said. Maybe they had too much fun last night and drank a lot of wine. Lin Feng smiled and said. I'll cook some porridge for them first. When they wake up, let them eat something to fill their stomachs. After all, they may feel uncomfortable after drinking. Zhang Yuxi said quickly. Wife, no need. There's a lot of food at home. When they all wake up, they can go out to a restaurant to eat. Lin Feng said slowly. That's fine. Zhang Yuxi responded. These bastards, how long are they going to sleep? Lin Feng muttered in his heart with some depression. Husband, why don't we go and wake them up? It's better to get up and eat something. How can we do that with an empty stomach after drinking last night? Zhang Yuxi said while lying in Lin Feng's arms. Wife, it's okay, don't worry about them. If it's too late, I'll take you out for dinner, and they can solve it themselves when they wake up. Lin Feng said. Then. That's fine. Zhang Yuxi nodded, and the two of them snuggled together. I'm mainly worried that you're hungry. I've been having breakfast since around 10 o'clock in the morning. Lin Feng said with a doting look on his face. When Zhang Yuxi heard this, her heart was sweet, as if she had eaten honey. Hey. Zhang Yuxi smiled happily. Silly wife, what are you laughing at? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi in his arms and said. Nothing. I just feel so happy. My husband always thinks of me. Zhang Yuxi said with a smile. Silly. You're my wife, who else can I think of if I don't think of you? Lin Feng stretched out his hand, scratched Zhang Yuxi's nose, and said. Yeah. Zhang Yuxi wrinkled her nose and said. In half an hour, it will be 4 o'clock in the afternoon. If they haven't gotten up yet, let them continue to sleep and we'll go out to eat first. Then, Lin Feng spoke. Zhang Yuxi nodded slightly. Wife, what do you want to eat when we go out later? Lin Feng asked. Anything is fine. I'm not picky. Zhang Yuxi blinked mischievously and said with a smile. You. Is there anything you want to eat in particular? Lin Feng pinched Zhang Yuxi's cheek and spoke. Yes. After Zhang Yuxi thought about it, a playful smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Chapter 1686 Street Food. What? Lin Feng asked after hearing the voice. I want to eat fried milk. It's a delicious street snack. Zhang Yuxi said playfully. Ha. My wife is also a foodie. Lin Feng said with a smile. Zhang Yuxi's cheeks immediately turned red after hearing Lin Feng's words. She buried her head in Lin Feng's arms shyly, her cheeks also flushed, as tempting as an apple. Oh. Then you ask me if I have anything special to eat. That's all I can think of now. Zhang Yuxi smiled and said. Okay. I know a store that has great fried milk. Why don't we go there to try it tonight? Lin Feng said with a smile after hearing Zhang Yuxi say this. Okay. Zhang Yuxi nodded. But, I'll take you to a restaurant for dinner first, and then take you to buy fried milk later, okay? What kind of food is there on that street? You can buy whatever you want to eat then. Lin Feng said with a smile. Yes, honey, you're so nice. Zhang Yuxi felt warm in her heart when she saw Lin Feng loving her so much. She put her arms around Lin Feng's neck and kissed him on the lips. Are you rewarding me? Lin Feng raised his mouth slightly and teased. Yes. That's right. Zhang Yuxi nodded and said. Then have another one. Lin Feng smiled and said. You're so greedy. Zhang Yuxi said with a smile. I'm only greedy for you. Lin Feng raised his eyebrows and said. Ha. I really admire you. You're sweet on my lips. Zhang Yuxi giggled when she heard Lin Feng's words. Her laughter was very clear, like a silver bell, very pleasant to the ear. Zhang Yuxi's laughter resounded in the room, making Lin Feng feel very happy. Wife, you look so beautiful when you smile. Lin Feng couldn't help but reach out and touch Zhang Yuxi's face and said. When Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng suddenly say this to her, her cheeks immediately turned red with shame. She lowered her head and dared not raise it. She just kept biting her lips and looking around, but she didn't look at him. Seeing Zhang Yuxi's shy look, Lin Feng couldn't help laughing. He stretched out his right hand to hold Zhang Yuxi's left hand and played with her white, tender and smooth right hand. Seeing Lin Feng like this, Zhang Yuxi felt even more shy and could only bury her head deeper. Wife, do you know? During this period of time, you are my biggest dream and my only hope. As long as I have you, I don't care about anything. As long as you are by my side, I am not afraid of anything. I don't have to worry about anything. I am not even afraid of death. Lin Feng held Zhang Yuxi's right hand and said softly. Hearing Lin Feng's words, Zhang Yuxi suddenly raised her head and looked at Lin Feng's face. She saw a pair of loving eyes looking at her, and seeing the serious look on Lin Feng's face, her heart was filled with sweetness. This man is hers. In this life, and in the next life. She didn't care how others viewed her, as long as he loved her. If he didn't love her, even if he was a king, he couldn't change his fate of not loving her. Husband, why do you say these words suddenly? Zhang Yuxi said with a smile. After she finished speaking, she lowered her head again. Seeing Zhang Yuxi's appearance, Lin Feng couldn't help laughing. He stretched out his left hand to hold Zhang Yuxi's slender and soft waist and hugged her tightly in his arms. Because I love you, my wife. Because you are my whole world. Lin Feng said while hugging Zhang Yuxi. Zhang Yuxi's heartbeat suddenly accelerated when she heard Lin Feng's words. Zhang Yuxi raised her head and looked at Lin Feng. Lin Feng's eyes were deep and charming, as if they were endless stars. His eyes seemed to attract people's souls. She was actually distracted by looking at these eyes. She stared at these eyes blankly, and a sweet feeling actually arose in her heart. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi like this, and his heart was filled with excitement and joy. My silly wife. Lin Feng said to Zhang Yuxi again. Zhang Yuxi still stared at Lin Feng blankly and did not respond to his words. Wife? What are you thinking about? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi like this and couldn't help but whispered. At this time, Zhang Yuxi reacted. She looked at Lin Feng, her eyes flashing with happiness. Husband, thank you, I am really so happy. How many good things did I do in my last life to meet such a good you? Zhang Yuxi stretched out her right hand, stroked Lin Feng's face and said. Silly. You are my wife, if I don't treat you well, should I treat other women well? Lin Feng asked softly. Zhang Yuxi couldn't help but feel a warm current in her heart when she heard Lin Feng's words. This warm current directly hit the softest part of her heart, making her feel indescribably comfortable. Lin Feng was right, he was her husband. If he didn't treat herself well, who would he treat well? Zhang Yuxi nodded gently. Silly girl, you are my only everything in this world, and I don't want anything else except you. Lin Feng said seriously. Husband, I believe in you, and I will always believe in you. Zhang Yuxi leaned on Lin Feng's chest and said with a very firm tone. She has been completely conquered by Lin Feng. Zhang Yuxi has never trusted a person so much, except Lin Feng. Silly. I said, I will give you all the sense of security. Lin Feng smiled and pinched Zhang Yuxi's nose, and said. His voice was very gentle, very pleasant, and intoxicating. Husband, you are so good. Zhang Yuxi leaned on Lin Feng's chest and said softly. Her heart was full of sweetness and happiness at this moment. She has been completely conquered by Lin Feng. She is willing to give her whole heart to Lin Feng, even if Lin Feng will betray her. She knows that Lin Feng will never betray her. You are so good, my wife is so good, so beautiful, so excellent, how can I bear to leave you? When the time comes, which stinky boy gets the advantage, I will be heartbroken. Lin Feng said with a smile. That's it. So now you, a stinky boy, are getting the advantage. Zhang Yuxi raised her head proudly and said, with a proud expression on her face. Lin Feng couldn't help but feel funny when he saw Zhang Yuxi like this. Zhang Yuxi is so cute that people are reluctant to let her go. They want to hide her and not let anyone see her like this. Hey. Yes, it's a good deal for a bad boy like me. Don't my wife love a bad boy like me? Lin Feng pinched Zhang Yuxi's face and said. Chapter 1687 Deliberate Release. Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, blinked her eyes playfully and said, well, love it. Love it. So you're not sure? Lin Feng was surprised when he heard this, and then said with a smile. Love. Zhang Yuxi nodded heavily. Lin Feng couldn't help but smile when he heard Zhang Yuxi's affirmative answer. Okay, since my wife is so sure, then I forgive you. But, you are not allowed to be unsure next time. Otherwise I will deal with you. Lin Feng's mouth corners slightly raised, and he said with a playful look. Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, and a blush of embarrassment immediately appeared on her face. Then, she stared at Lin Feng and said, Hate. You only know how to bully me. Haha, how dare I bully you, don't I love you? Who told you to say you love me unsurely? Lin Feng said with a smile. Who told you to always bully me? Then I'm just teasing you on purpose. You can't bully me anymore. Otherwise I'll bite you. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said. Her mood became very good, and she looked very happy. Yes, my wife is right. Lin Feng said with a smile, with a doting expression on his face. You bad guy. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng's expression that deserved a beating, and she couldn't help but punch Lin Feng's chest lightly and said. This punch hit Lin Feng's chest, but Zhang Yuxi didn't use much strength, and she felt that she couldn't hurt Lin Feng at all. As soon as she finished saying this, she punched Lin Feng hard a few more times. Her strength was very small, and even if she didn't use much strength, it wouldn't hurt Lin Feng. Zhang Yuxi's action seemed like tickling to Lin Feng. You can't do this, you have to learn some martial arts. Wife, are you letting me off on purpose because you feel sorry for me? It's just like tickling. Lin Feng said. He had a smile on his face, and he deliberately straightened his body while speaking. Humph. I don't feel sorry for you. Zhang Yuxi snorted coldly, and her palm gently patted Lin Feng's chest, and then began to exert force. Her palm wind was very weak, just like a kitten's paw gently scratching Lin Feng's body, itchy, but not painful, but a little stimulating. Although Zhang Yuxi did not use all her strength, Lin Feng would not let her get her wish. Lin Feng's hand suddenly grasped Zhang Yuxi's wrist, and then pulled Zhang Yuxi into his arms, and he hugged Zhang Yuxi tightly. Ah! Zhang Yuxi was startled by Lin Feng's sudden action. She screamed subconsciously, but she reacted quickly. She stretched out her arms to hug Lin Feng, and her arms tightly wrapped around Lin Feng's neck. Zhang Yuxi's hands were around Lin Feng's neck, and she lay on Lin Feng's body. The two were very close, and she could even feel Lin Feng's body temperature and heartbeat. Wife, are you really willing to hit me? Lin Feng leaned close to Zhang Yuxi's cheek and spoke in a low voice. Zhang Yuxi's face changed when she heard Lin Feng's words. She quickly broke free from Lin Feng's hands, then stepped back, looking at Lin Feng with a red face, her eyes somewhat evasive, not daring to look directly at Lin Feng's eyes. I am willing to do it. Didn't you say that I hit you like tickling you? Zhang Yuxi said with a proud look on her face. Ha ha ha. Lin Feng couldn't help laughing when he heard Zhang Yuxi say that. He stretched out his hand to rub Zhang Yuxi's head, and then said, "Wife, you are so cute. Don't laugh. If you laugh at me, I will hit you." Zhang Yuxi stretched out her hand and pinched Lin Feng's arm. Ouch! Lin Feng screamed in pain, and then quickly said with a wronged look, "Wife, how can you bear to pinch me? What do you say?" Zhang Yuxi rolled her eyes at Lin Feng and spoke unhappily. "How can I know what to do?" Lin Feng spread his hands, with a helpless look on his face. "Didn't you say that I was tickling you when I hit you? So, I just want to teach you a lesson," Zhang Yuxi said with a fierce look on her face. As soon as she finished speaking, Lin Feng's palm stretched out. Zhang Yuxi thought that Lin Feng was going to hide her, and she subconsciously closed her eyes. But she waited for a long time and didn't feel any pain. So she opened her eyes, and found that Lin Feng just touched her head and didn't do anything to her. "Are you going to ask why you didn't hit me? Because I can't bear it." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, his face was full of doting. "Hate," Zhang Yuxi said shyly. She reached out and gently hit Lin Feng's shoulder. Although Zhang Yuxi said she hated it, she felt very sweet in her heart, and the expression on her face was also very enjoyable. "Wife, your heart is beating so fast." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, then hugged Zhang Yuxi in his arms, put his face in Zhang Yuxi's hair and smelled the scent of Zhang Yuxi's hair. "Hate it. You, stop making trouble." Zhang Yuxi pushed Lin Feng and said, "How could I make trouble? I said your heart is beating so fast, don't you know you are very tempting like this?" Lin Feng's mouth corners slightly raised, and he said with a smile on his face, "This. Eh?" Zhang Yuxi's heart trembled suddenly, and then she lowered her head, her face flushed. "Wife, are you shy?" After Lin Feng saw Zhang Yuxi's expression, his heart was immediately filled with joy. I'm not." Zhang Yuxi raised her head and glared at Lin Feng, but her words sounded like she was trying to cover up something. Okay, you didn't. You are my wife, how can I not know what you are thinking?" Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, with a serious expression on his face. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, with a shy expression on her face. She bit her lips lightly, and then asked, "Then do you know what I'm thinking?" "I don't know." Lin Feng shook his head directly, and then he said with a smile, "I'm not the worm in your stomach. You." Zhang Yuxi was very angry with Lin Feng. She poked Lin Feng's chest with her hand, and then said, "Then you said I'm your wife, how can you not know what I'm thinking? I know you so well, how can I not know?" Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said. Then, he reached out and stroked Zhang Yuxi's hair and said with a smile, "Wife, I only know that you want to bite me to death now." Chapter 1688, Brief Warmth. "You." Zhang Yuxi glared at Lin Feng. Then, a smile appeared on her face. She stretched out her hand and held Lin Feng's arm, and said, "If you dare to talk nonsense again, I will bite you to death." Although Zhang Yuxi's mouth was fierce, there was a smile in the depths of her eyes. "My silly wife, you are so cute." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and a brilliant arc appeared at the corner of his mouth. He stretched out his hand and pinched Zhang Yuxi's cheek, and a smirk appeared on his face. "You are not allowed to touch me." Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, stretched out her hand to take Lin Feng's hand away, and then she stretched out her hand to slap Lin Feng's hand away, and then said seriously, "Humph, if you touch me now, I will bite you too. Don't let me touch you. I want to touch you. My wife, why can't I touch you?" Lin Feng stretched out his hand and rubbed Zhang Yuxi's hair, his eyes showing a strong love. He stared at Zhang Yuxi's pretty face, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then he hugged Zhang Yuxi tightly in his arms. "You big bad guy." Zhang Yuxi was a little flustered. She didn't dare to look into Lin Feng's eyes. She was afraid of seeing Lin Feng's fiery eyes. She felt her heartbeat speed up. Zhang Yuxi wanted to struggle out of Lin Feng's arms, but Lin Feng's arms were like iron hoops that held Zhang Yuxi firmly, making it impossible for her to escape from Lin Feng's arms. Lin Feng held Zhang Yuxi's pretty face with both hands. He looked into Zhang Yuxi's eyes and put his mouth close to Zhang Yuxi's ear and said, "Wife, do you want to run away?" When Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's voice, her whole body was stiff. She didn't move, but just stared at Lin Feng's eyes dully, her face flushed, and she looked delicate. I? I don't want to run away. Zhang Yuxi was made weak and powerless by Lin Feng's actions. She looked into Lin Feng's eyes and opened her mouth, but in the end she didn't say a word. Then why don't you dare to look at me? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said. Who said I don't dare to look at you? I just don't want to see you. Zhang Yuxi looked into Lin Feng's eyes, and a slight blush appeared on her face. Oh? Really? You don't dare to look at me, are you guilty? Lin Feng said with a joking face. Zhang Yuxi felt even more embarrassed when she saw Lin Feng's look. She didn't know how to deal with Lin Feng's rogue teasing, so she could only deal with Lin Feng with silence. Her silence fell into Lin Feng's eyes, but he was happy in his heart. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and the smile on his face became more and more intense. He began to slowly approach Zhang Yuxi, and the distance between them became closer and closer. You are annoying. You, don't come near me. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, and a trace of horror appeared on her face. She stretched out her hand to resist Lin Feng's chest to prevent Lin Feng from approaching her again. Don't you want to hit me? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi affectionately and said. I don't want to. Zhang Yuxi shook her head, with a shy expression on her face. Don't you want to? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a playful expression on her face, and he said. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng with a shameful expression on her face, then she opened her cherry mouth and gently bit Lin Feng's lips. Because she still couldn't bear to bite Lin Feng hard and hurt him. Well. Hiss. Lin Feng felt pain, he groaned, then he let go of Zhang Yuxi, put his hand over his mouth, and pretended to show a look of pain on his face. Lin Feng reached out and touched Zhang Yuxi's mouth. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said exaggeratedly, Wife, you are really in pain. Zhang Yuxi saw Lin Feng's hand on her mouth, her heart throbbed, she looked into Lin Feng's eyes and said, I am you too. It's just a little harder. Zhang Yuxi said with a guilty conscience. Really? Lin Feng looked into Zhang Yuxi's eyes. He reached out and lifted Zhang Yuxi's chin, looking at Zhang Yuxi speechlessly. Zhang Yuxi was startled by Lin Feng's action. She quickly closed her eyes, but she felt Lin Feng's warm lips on her cheek. She did not refuse, but just felt Lin Feng's tenderness. Her breathing gradually became rapid, and the blush on her face became more intense. After a long time, Lin Feng left Zhang Yuxi's cherry mouth, and then he reached out and stroked Zhang Yuxi's pretty face. He said with a doting look on his face, If you want to bite me, just bite me. Who made you my wife? Zhang Yuxi felt even more shy when she heard Lin Feng's words. She looked at Lin Feng, and a hint of rosy color appeared on her face. Zhang Yuxi felt a warm feeling in her heart at this moment. Zhang Yuxi felt that the happiness at this moment was so beautiful. She looked at Lin Feng, with a strange light flashing in her eyes. Husband. Zhang Yuxi reached out and grabbed Lin Feng's sleeve. She raised her head and looked at Lin Feng expectantly. Well? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and a wicked smile emerged on his face. His eyes looked at Zhang Yuxi, and that look seemed to carry a kind of magic, which made people involuntarily indulge in his eyes. Zhang Yuxi looked into Lin Feng's eyes, her mind was blank, and she didn't know what she was saying at all. She could only stand there stupidly, and she felt like she was about to melt. Silly wife. What's wrong with you? Lin Feng smiled and said. Zhang Yuxi stuttered. She looked into Lin Feng's eyes. She wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi. He saw that there was a deep desire in the depths of Zhang Yuxi's eyes. He reached out and gently stroked Zhang Yuxi's forehead. Zhang Yuxi felt the warmth of Lin Feng's palm, and her heart beat violently a few times. Wife? What's the matter? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, with a fiery light flashing in the depths of his eyes. He stretched out his hand to hold Zhang Yuxi's shoulders. He looked into Zhang Yuxi's eyes with a smile on his lips. Zhang Yuxi's heart was also full of shyness. She stretched out her hand to hold Lin Feng, her eyes full of shyness. I'm fine. I just feel that you really spoil me. Aren't you afraid of spoiling me? Zhang Yuxi said gently while lying in Lin Feng's arms. I like to spoil you like this. Besides, if I spoil you, I spoil you. No matter what you are, I love you. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, his eyes filled with tenderness. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng's eyes, feeling the masculine scent coming from Lin Feng, and her face flushed. A sweet feeling rose in her heart. She felt the scent emanating from Lin Feng, and her heart was also infatuated. Her head nestled in Lin Feng's arms, quietly enjoying this brief warmth. Chapter 1689, Falling into the Swamp of Happiness. Hubby. Zhang Yuxi called softly. Wife, what's wrong? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and asked softly. You're so nice. Zhang Yuxi buried her head deeply in Lin Feng's neck and said. Silly. Lin Feng gently hugged Zhang Yuxi, and he looked at Zhang Yuxi with tenderness in his eyes. Hubby, thank you. Zhang Yuxi looked up and looked at Lin Feng. She felt Lin Feng's embrace and the faint smell of soap coming from Lin Feng, and her heart was excited. I'm so lucky. Zhang Yuxi felt Lin Feng's warmth, and she looked at Lin Feng and said. Silly wife, you're still polite to me. Lin Feng gently stroked Zhang Yuxi's hair and said. Well, I don't care, I just want to thank you. Meeting you is my greatest luck. Zhang Yuxi nodded, and her eyes also showed a happy look. Zhang Yuxi was very happy. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and his eyes also showed a happy look. He lowered his head and placed a kiss on Zhang Yuxi's lips, then he gently rubbed Zhang Yuxi's face. His hand slid to Zhang Yuxi's waist, and his palm gently stroked Zhang Yuxi's waist, making Zhang Yuxi feel a little itchy and comfortable at the same time. Husband. Zhang Yuxi called softly. Be good. Don't move. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said. Oh. Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, she nodded obediently, and then lay quietly on Lin Feng's chest, listening to Lin Feng's strong heartbeat. Wife, I will always treat you well. Forever. Because you deserve it. I love you, even more than I love myself. You are everything to me, you are my life. Lin Feng hugged Zhang Yuxi and said with deep affection. Zhang Yuxi felt Lin Feng's deep affection, she felt Lin Feng's deep affection, and she heard Lin Feng's confession. After hearing Lin Feng's confession, Zhang Yuxi felt soft all over. She felt like she was about to melt, and her eyes were wet. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and a smile appeared on his lips. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, Silly, don't cry. How could I cry? I didn't cry. Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, and a smile appeared on her lips, and then she reached out to wipe the tears from her face. She didn't want Lin Feng to see her weakness. My silly wife. Just a little crybaby. Lin Feng pinched Zhang Yuxi's face and said dotingly. Hate it. I'm not. Zhang Yuxi said with a pout. She looked at Lin Feng, and her heart was also warm. She felt Lin Feng's love and Lin Feng's doting. She felt very happy in her heart. She felt Lin Feng's tenderness, and she felt as if she was trapped in a swamp of happiness, surrounded by love. Okay, you are not. My silly wife. Lin Feng said with a smile. He gently patted Zhang Yuxi's back. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, Wife? Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and nodded. In the future, I will always spoil you. For the rest of your life, you can always be yourself, don't think about anything else. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said. Zhang Yuxi smiled when she heard the words. She looked at Lin Feng, her eyes flashed with light. She looked at Lin Feng, her heart was very moved. Husband, I love you so much, you can always treat me so well, I am really so happy. I must have done a lot of good things in my last life, so I can have such a wonderful happiness in this life. Zhang Yuxi said sweetly. I love you too, I love you very much, I love you very much, I love you more than I love myself. I just want you to be good, be my princess, and spoil you for the rest of your life. Lin Feng said with a deep look on his face. Husband. Zhang Yuxi's eyes turned red when she heard Lin Feng's words. She looked at the deep affection in Lin Feng's eyes and felt Lin Feng's love. Even though she often heard Lin Feng say these sincere words, she was still very moved every time she heard them. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and felt infinite sweetness in her heart. She felt that this was the happiest moment of her life and the greatest gain of her life. Husband. I love you. I love you too, very much. Zhang Yuxi hugged Lin Feng tightly. She felt Lin Feng's embrace and felt a taste of happiness in her heart. Many pictures appeared in her mind. She thought of the pictures of herself and Lin Feng together before, the time they were together, and many beautiful pictures. A smile appeared on her face, a happy and beautiful smile. Wife? Don't cry. Lin Feng whispered Zhang Yuxi's name in a low voice. He felt a faint body fragrance emanating from Zhang Yuxi, and his heart felt endless happiness and satisfaction. A smile appeared on his lips. He looked at the woman in his arms, and his heart was filled with infinite happiness. Zhang Yuxi closed her eyes and listened to Lin Feng's words. She felt Lin Feng's love. She felt that everything was too happy and wonderful. It was like a dream, but she knew that it was true. I won't cry. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said. She didn't want to cry. She didn't want to cry in front of Lin Feng, and didn't want to make Lin Feng worry. That's good. When we reach the legal age for marriage, I will make you the most beautiful bride in the world and marry me. Lin Feng said. He looked at Zhang Yuxi in his arms, and his eyes were shining. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, and his eyes were full of endless love. Okay. I agree to whatever you say. Zhang Yuxi heard this and nodded. I will take good care of you and won't let anyone hurt you. You are my only wife, Lin Feng, and only you are worthy of being my wife. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said seriously. Zhang Yuxi nodded when she heard Lin Feng's words. She looked into Lin Feng's eyes and said, I believe you. Husband, I will find you in the next life. Zhang Yuxi said while looking at Lin Feng's face. She looked at Lin Feng's face and his clear eyes. She felt that Lin Feng was the happiest man in her life. That was enough. She was also very happy in her heart. She felt that everything was very happy. She felt that everything she had was worth it. Lin Feng was startled when he heard the words. Then he smiled and said, haha, okay, I will always wait for you here, waiting for you to come. Don't forget me. Otherwise I will settle accounts with you. Hehe. Zhang Yuxi laughed when he heard the words. How could I? I will never forget you. You are the most important person to me. How can I bear to forget you? Don't worry. Lin Feng said with a smile when he heard the words. His tone was full of determination. Zhang Yuxi smiled and said, then let's make a pinky promise. Okay. Lin Feng also stretched out his right hand when he heard the words. The two of them held their hands together, then held each other's hands tightly. Chapter 1692 Childish Ghosts. Let's make a promise, and we won't change for 100 years. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said. Well, okay, let's make a promise, and we won't change for 100 years, we made a promise. Lin Feng nodded when he heard it. We too are childish. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said with a smile, she was very happy in her heart. She knew that Lin Feng always cooperated with her to do some strange things. Even if it was childish, Lin Feng was very cooperative. She felt Lin Feng's love for her. She knew that Lin Feng loved her sincerely, and she felt that her life was complete. It is said that two people who love each other very much sometimes become very childish. While Lin Feng was talking, he reached out and touched Zhang Yuxi's hair. He felt that Zhang Yuxi's hair was very soft and comfortable to touch, just like silk. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, and the corners of her mouth showed a happy smile. Zhang Yuxi and Lin Feng held hands tightly and stared at each other. Zhang Yuxi had a happy smile on her face, and Lin Feng also had a bright smile on his face. They looked at each other's smiles, and their eyes were full of love. They both looked at each other so fondly and happily, and both cherished the fate of meeting each other very much. So, we are two people who love each other very very much. Thank you, husband, for always accompanying me in weird and cute ways. Zhang Yuxi said happily. Ha ha ha. Just keep being naughty, I like you like this. In the future, I hope you will always keep your innocence, be as happy as a child, and always keep this look. I like to see your smile. Lin Feng smiled and said with a doting face. Yeah, okay. Beside you, I will always be a child. He. Zhang Yuxi nodded, with a smile on her face. Her smile was very bright, very warm, very brilliant, and gave people a very good feeling. Zhang Yuxi and Lin Feng looked at each other. They both had smiles on their faces. The two of them stared at each other closely, with a strong sense of friendship in their eyes. They love each other so much, they depend on each other so much, and they stay together for life so much. Zhang Yuxi and Lin Feng thought so in their hearts, and their love was very beautiful. There were no secrets between them, they could tell each other everything, and they were very frank, and they loved each other very much. Well, my dear baby. Lin Feng called dotingly. Zhang Yuxi smiled shyly when she heard this. She rolled her eyes at Lin Feng, then she punched Lin Feng lightly and scolded him. Oh, you should call me wife. Wife, 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 wife. Lin Feng kept calling. Zhang Yuxi listened to Lin Feng calling her wife, and a sweet smile appeared on her face. Then she stretched out her arms, hugged Lin Feng's waist, put her head on Lin Feng's chest, and listened to Lin Feng's heartbeat. She could hear Lin Feng's inner heart from his heartbeat. She could hear Lin Feng's heartbeat. This was a very stable feeling. This was a feeling that made people feel very safe, which made Zhang Yuxi feel at ease. Okay, stop shouting. I'm here, I'm here. I'm here. Zhang Yuxi said playfully. Lin Feng smiled and looked at Zhang Yuxi. He shook his head and reached out to touch Zhang Yuxi's hair. You girl. I'm your man now, your husband. Lin Feng smiled and said to Zhang Yuxi. Well, I know, of course I know, so I won't resist. It's useless to resist. I'm not your opponent. Zhang Yuxi pouted and looked at Lin Feng, saying with a coquettish face. She had a happy smile on her face, and she looked very cute. Lin Feng smiled and stretched out his hand to pinch Zhang Yuxi's nose. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said with a smile, how can I have such a beautiful wife? When Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng say this, her face immediately turned rosy. When Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng say this, she felt very happy, because Lin Feng's words proved that she meant a lot to Lin Feng. You are getting more and more annoying. Zhang Yuxi scolded with a smile. She had a sweet smile on her face, and that smile was very bright. She was in a very good mood, and she was very happy in her heart. Annoying? Then I'll kiss you, and you won't be annoying anymore. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile, with an evil smile on his face, and asked Zhang Yuxi with a smile on his face. When Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng say this, she immediately raised her head and glared at Lin Feng, and a blush appeared on her cheeks. She looked at Lin Feng, feeling a little shy. A shy look appeared on her face, and she glared at Lin Feng. You are annoying. Zhang Yuxi said with a shy look on her face. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's expression, and a smile suddenly appeared on his face. Zhang Yuxi looked so cute. He looked at Zhang Yuxi's appearance, and a smile also appeared on his face. Lin Feng stretched out his hand, pinched Zhang Yuxi's cheek, and said with a smile, I want to take advantage of you. Zhang Yuxi's face immediately turned red when she was pinched by Lin Feng. She glared at Lin Feng and said, You bad guy, you want to bully me again, I will fight you. Ho ha ho ha. Lin Feng couldn't help laughing when he heard what Zhang Yuxi said. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile. He looked at Zhang Yuxi's appearance, and he thought it was very funny. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and laughed. She was also very happy in her heart, and a smile appeared at the corner of her mouth, and she was in a very good mood. What are you laughing at? You big bad guy. Zhang Yuxi said unhappily. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile. A smug expression appeared on his face. You big bad guy, you're still laughing. If you dare to laugh, I'll bite you to death. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, then stretched out her hand and made a gesture to bite Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile. He stretched out his hand and grabbed Zhang Yuxi's right hand, and said, Wife, are you serious? Humph. Who's afraid of who? Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said. After she finished speaking, she opened her mouth and prepared to bite Lin Feng. Her mouth was wide open, and she looked fierce and fierce. Her lips were like cherries, pink and attractive, and she looked very cute. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 1691. I'm just cheating. Ho ha ho ha. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and laughed out loud. Because at this moment, from this angle, Zhang Yuxi looked like an angry little rabbit, so cute. No matter how fierce her expression was, it would only turn into another kind of cute and innocent expression. Lin Feng was sure that he would not be bitten to death by Zhang Yuxi. However, it was hard to say whether he would be killed by cuteness. Zhang Yuxi still had a slightly puffy face and showed no intention of relaxing. Lin Feng's heart was so cute that it almost melted into a pool of water. Come on, my silly wife. Bite me. Don't show mercy. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi expectantly, as if he was ready to be picked. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, her mouth opened wide, and it looked like she really wanted to bite Lin Feng, and she really wanted to bite him. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile on his face, and his eyes were also looking at Zhang Yuxi without blinking. Humph. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and snorted coldly. You big bad guy, you are cheating. Zhang Yuxi said. She muttered a few words. And while mumbling, she backed away, trying to leave Lin Feng's arms. However, Lin Feng did not give her a chance to escape. Lin Feng grabbed Zhang Yuxi's right hand directly, and he took Zhang Yuxi into his arms, his right hand tightly grasping Zhang Yuxi's wrist. I'm cheating. Because I know that my wife can't bear to bite me. My wife is the most caring. Lin Feng's mouth corners slightly raised, smiled, and said proudly. A faint blush appeared on Zhang Yuxi's cheeks. She looked at Lin Feng, and then muttered, how can you become so bad? This is my nature. Wife, are you afraid? If you are afraid, just say it, don't refuse to admit it. Lin Feng said jokingly. He smiled at Zhang Yuxi, with an ambiguous look in his eyes. Zhang Yuxi looked at the smile on Lin Feng's face, and her cheeks became even redder. Although Zhang Yuxi was shy, she did not refute. Because Zhang Yuxi really couldn't bear to bite Lin Feng, and she also liked the way Lin Feng looked, so she didn't refuse. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, then nodded and said, I'm not afraid. After she finished speaking, she turned her head away. Zhang Yuxi lowered her eyes were slightly closed, and there was a blush on her face, which looked so charming. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi like this, and he liked it very much in his heart. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, and there was a touch of tenderness in his eyes. There was a gentle light flashing in his eyes, which looked particularly charming. Lin Feng's eyes were full of strong emotions. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, and a smile also appeared on his face. He smiled and said, I'm so bad, my wife is really not afraid. Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, and a coquettish look appeared on her face, and then she stared at Lin Feng and said, I'm not afraid. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile on his face. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with a doting look on his face. He reached out and touched Zhang Yuxi's head, and then said, you are so brave that you are not afraid of me. Humph. If you want to bully me, I will. I will. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said. After that, she pouted her little mouth again, with an extremely cute look, which made Lin Feng couldn't help laughing. What about you? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and asked, with a teasing tone in his tone. I will. Zhang Yuxi deliberately stretched out her tone. I will beat you, kick you, hit you, pinch you, and then let you know how powerful I am. See if you dare to bully me again in the future. Zhang Yuxi pouted and looked at Lin Feng and said. When Zhang Yuxi pouted, her cheeks bulged slightly, like a peach, and she looked very cute. After Zhang Yuxi finished speaking, she stretched out her right hand and hammered Lin Feng's chest with her fist, and then hammered it again and again, looking very lovable. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's actions. A doting look appeared in his eyes. He stretched out his hand, held Zhang Yuxi's hands, and said, Wife, you must be reluctant to use force against me. Zhang Yuxi was speechless when she heard Lin Feng's words, and she didn't know what to say. Zhang Yuxi thought for a while. She looked at Lin Feng and said, Who said I couldn't bear to hit you? I can. After Zhang Yuxi finished speaking, she pouted, with a touch of coquettishness on her face, looking very cute. Haha. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's appearance, then chuckled and smiled. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said with a smile, Then hit me, my wife, you can hit me however you want, I won't resist. Lin Feng knew Zhang Yuxi very well. Some of Zhang Yuxi's punches and kicks were just tickling to him, and Zhang Yuxi never used ruthless hands, because she couldn't bear it. When Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, her mouth pouted slightly, and a look of disdain appeared on her cheeks. She looked at Lin Feng and said, Cut, forget it, who wants to beat you? I don't want it. Zhang Yuxi raised her chin proudly and said, Ho ha ho ha. Wife, that's right. I know my wife just can't bear it. Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words and said with a smile. There was a smile on his face, and there was a smile of success in his eyes. When Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, she was speechless and didn't know what to say. Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words and said with a smile. He had a smile on his face, and a triumphant smile in his eyes. You bad guy. I'm not reluctant. Zhang Yuxi's cheeks turned slightly red when she heard Lin Feng's words, and then she grumbled and spoke. She grumbled, looking so cute that people couldn't help but want to kiss her. There was a blush on her cheeks, and she looked like a ripe apple, which made people want to take a bite. Looking at the expression on Zhang Yuxi's face, Lin Feng was also very happy in his heart. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and his eyes were also full of a doting look. Looking so gentle, he said, Wife, I know you can't bear to part with it. After he said this, he reached out and stroked Zhang Yuxi's hair, and then put his head close to Zhang Yuxi's cheek, his cheek close to Zhang Yuxi's pretty face. Chapter 1692, A Narcissist. Lin Feng's breath sprayed on Zhang Yuxi's cheek. His lips were only about half a centimeter away from Zhang Yuxi's cheek. Zhang Yuxi also looked at Lin Feng with a pair of bright eyes, and there was a hint of shyness in her eyes. Is it? Lin Feng's mouth corners slightly raised, and he smiled and said. Her body leaned back slightly, and then she said with a proud look on her face, You think too much? I didn't. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's reaction, with a smile on his lips, and his eyes were full of a hint of teasing. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, Haha, wife, don't deny it, I saw that coquettish look just now, I saw it. Huh? Who was coquettish? Who saw it? I didn't see it. Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, she quickly denied it, but a blush appeared on her face, looking very tempting. After Zhang Yuxi finished speaking, she stretched out her right hand to cover her cheek. Looking at her right hand, the expression on her face became more charming and lovely. Seeing Zhang Yuxi like this, Lin Feng was also amused by her. Ha 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 ha. He stretched out his hand and rubbed Zhang Yuxi's head. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng's actions, she pouted slightly, and then said, I don't want you to rub my head. After Zhang Yuxi finished speaking, she stretched out her hand and slapped Lin Feng's hand away. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a doting face, then stretched out his hand and pinched Zhang Yuxi's face, and said, Great. My wife is becoming more and more domineering. After Lin Feng said this, he stretched out his right hand and gently stroked Zhang Yuxi's cheek. A blush appeared on Zhang Yuxi's cheek. She raised her right hand to block Lin Feng's hand, and then said, I don't allow you to touch my face either. After Zhang Yuxi said this, she lowered her head, and then held Lin Feng's cheeks with both hands. A blush also appeared on her face. She looked at Lin Feng with a hint of coquettishness in her eyes. Ho ha ho ha. Looking at Zhang Yuxi's appearance, Lin Feng laughed, then stretched out his hand and scratched Zhang Yuxi's nose, and then said, Wife, you are still so cute. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's appearance, with a smile on his face, looking so doting and warm, people couldn't help but envy him. I don't want you to scratch my nose either. Zhang Yuxi said with a proud look on her face. When Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words, he laughed unconsciously, and immediately hugged Zhang Yuxi's waist and said, Then what else can I do? When Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, her cheeks were red, and she looked very cute and charming. She looked at Lin Feng and said, You can't do anything. How can that be? I'm your man. I can't help but touch your head, pinch your cheeks, scratch your nose, and so many more. When Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words, he smiled and said. After Lin Feng finished speaking, his hand rubbed Zhang Yuxi's cheek again, and a layer of pink appeared on her cheek, which looked very cute, and people wanted to rub it. Hate. Zhang Yuxi muttered, and she stretched out her hand to push Lin Feng. When Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words, he also stretched out his hand and gently patted Zhang Yuxi's lower body a few times. Crack. Crack. Zhang Yuxi felt the pain from her lower body, and a hint of shyness appeared on her pretty face. She stretched out her hand and covered Lin Feng's hand, looking very cute. You guy, dare to bully me. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said coquettishly, then stretched out her hand and hugged Lin Feng again. I like it. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and said with a smile on his face. HMPH. Hateful. Big bad guy. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, and she stretched out her hand and twisted Lin Feng's arm twice. Hiss. Lin Feng took a breath of cold air, and he looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, Wife, you are murdering your husband again. HMPH. Who told you to bully me? Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, and she couldn't help laughing at the look on Lin Feng's face. Oh, my dear wife, I was wrong. My dear wife, you are magnanimous and don't bother with me. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, and then he stretched out his hand and tapped the tip of Zhang Yuxi's nose. Seeing Lin Feng's actions, Zhang Yuxi also reached out and poked Lin Feng's chest and said, I'm not generous, so I have to argue with you. Ha ha ha. If you argue with me, I'm also very happy to accept it. After all, you are my wife. No matter who bullies you, I will definitely help you teach him a lesson. Lin Feng reached out and held Zhang Yuxi's hand, and then said seriously, with a smile on his face. What if you bully me? Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, she looked at Lin Feng's face with a mischievous smile, and she also showed a mischievous look on her face, and then asked, He then my wife, you bully me too. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's face with a smile, and then said, Provoke I won't. I'm too lazy to bully you. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, she also pouted, and then said. She blinked her eyes and looked at Lin Feng with a mischievous face. Hey. So my wife can't bear to part with you after all. Lin Feng looked at the expression on Zhang Yuxi's face, and the smile on his face became deeper and deeper. He stretched out his hand and scratched Zhang Yuxi's cheek. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with a doting smile on his face. Humph, you are really narcissistic. I won't be reluctant to part with you. Zhang Yuxi curled her lips when she heard Lin Feng's words, and then spoke. She also looked disdainful, but there was a hint of happiness at the corner of her mouth. Yes, I am narcissistic. But I can't help it. Who made me handsome? Who made my wife love me so much? Right. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's happy face, and he couldn't help but speak. He looked at Zhang Yuxi's face, and then spoke, his face full of pride. Yo narcissist. Zhang Yuxi rolled her eyes when she heard Lin Feng's words, and then stretched out her hand to pinch Lin Feng's face, pretending to dislike Lin Feng. Look, you dislike me again. When Lin Feng saw Zhang Yuxi's look, he also pouting, looking aggrieved. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and spoke. Chapter 1693 Planting Strawberries. Zhang Yuxi couldn't help but burst out laughing when she heard Lin Feng's words, and then said, You conceited guy. After Zhang Yuxi finished speaking, her eyes fell on Lin Feng. Wife, why are you staring at me like that? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's beautiful big eyes staring at him, and he couldn't help but ask, and then asked. I want to see how handsome you are. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said, then she stretched out her hand and gently poked Lin Feng's nose. You are getting more and more naughty. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and he also showed a helpless smile on his face, and then shook his head and said. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng's frustrated look. She also snorted, and then her mouth pouted, with a look of unwillingness to admit defeat on her face. Zhang Yuxi's face also showed a touch of arrogance, which looked very cute, and also made Lin Feng feel very cute. Then, wife, have you finished reading? How handsome do you think your husband is? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and the expression on his face was also a faint smile. Well, it's okay, just barely pass. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, and she said with a proud look on her face, but when she looked at Lin Feng, there was also a hint of teasing in her eyes. Wife, is your husband not as good as your classmates? Or do you think your husband is not as handsome as them? My husband, I am your man. When Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words, his brows were tightly furrowed, and the expression on his face became serious. What you said hurt my young heart. Wife, I am scarred now. Hey, my wife actually thinks I barely pass. Lin Feng said, and stretched out his hand to cover his chest, pretending to say. Puff. Ho ha ho ho ha ho ha. Seeing Lin Feng pretending to be wronged, Zhang Yuxi couldn't help laughing. She stretched out her hand and punched Lin Feng hard on the shoulder. Okay. You're still pretending. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng pretending to be aggrieved, and she also said with a smile. Oh. Wife, you think I'm not handsome, I'm sad. When Lin Feng heard what Zhang Yuxi said, he also covered his chest and shouted, and then his face also showed a look of pain. Okay, my husband is the most handsome in the world. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng's appearance. She was also a little funny. She stretched out her hand and patted Lin Feng's chest, looking at Lin Feng and said. That's about right. Then wife, have you rewarded your husband? Lin Feng said with expectation. Well, let me think about it. When Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said, she also showed a thoughtful expression on her face. Let me think about it. Zhang Yuxi also spoke, with a hint of seriousness in her tone, and then her eyes rolled around, and finally she suddenly remembered something, and then raised her hand and kissed Lin Feng's neck hard, saying, This is compensation. Wow. Wife, you are so violent. Lin Feng was pinched by Zhang Yuxi like this, and he immediately let out a miserable howl, and then he looked at Zhang Yuxi and said. This is the reward. Grow a big strawberry on your neck. Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, and she also smiled and said. Big strawberry. Good idea. Then should I also leave one for my wife? Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words, and his eyes lit up and said, and then his face also showed a hint of excitement. I don't want to wish. Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, her pretty face blushed, and then pushed Lin Feng away and said. That's not up to you. I want to stay, ha ha ha. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a wicked smile on his face. He grabbed Zhang Yuxi's arm and pulled her into his arms. Don't mess around, let go. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, and a shy look appeared on her face. She struggled to speak. However, there was also a hint of coquettishness on her face, which looked extremely attractive. Wife, you just bit me, I have to give you a taste of it. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and there was also a hint of cunning on his face. What if I don't agree? Zhang Yuxi said with a proud expression on her face. Then I can only take other actions. For example, when Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words, he also smiled a little. Zhang Yuxi didn't know what the other actions he was talking about were. However, looking at his wicked smile and domineering look, Zhang Yuxi also guessed a little. But she was not afraid at all. Instead, she looked at Lin Feng with a hint of teasing, and then asked charmingly, like what? Like? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's beautiful face, his eyes were full of fiery expression, and his mouth corners were also hooked up with an evil arc. Lin Feng took advantage of Zhang Yuxi's inattention and immediately approached her neck and gently planted a strawberry on her neck. Bad guy. Zhang Yuxi also stretched out a slender finger and knocked on Lin Feng's head, and then glared at Lin Feng coquettishly. How can you sneak attack me? Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said, although she felt sweet in her heart, she still said it stubbornly. Who told you to be naughty? Huh? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi. He also said seriously, and then he pretended to be serious, looking very cute. Who told you to sneak attack me? Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng's serious look and asked with a smile. Then she stretched out her pink fist and hit Lin Feng's chest, saying, you stinky hooligan. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's cute look and smiled. Then he said, you can't just allow my wife to grow strawberries and not me, right? Wife, do you think I'm right? Lin Feng said, looking at Zhang Yuxi with a smirk. No, no. You're taking advantage. Super. Chapter 1694, Lovers Who Cherish Each Other. Zhang Yuxi saw Lin Feng's look. She also had a hint of shyness in her heart, and a hint of delicate color on her face. She didn't dare to look Lin Feng in the eye, and she lowered her head, but her eyes were erratic, and she didn't dare to look Lin Feng in the eye. Seeing Zhang Yuxi's shy look, Lin Feng was also a little obsessed, and then his eyes were also flashing with a fiery light. Wife? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and a gentle smile appeared on his face. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, and a hint of hot light flashed in his eyes. Why are you looking at me like this? Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, and she also looked at Lin Feng. I'm looking at my wife. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and he also spoke, and then his hand gently stroked Zhang Yuxi's hair, with a strong love in his eyes. You bad guy. Zhang Yuxi blushed when she heard Lin Feng's words, and then she scolded coquettishly. She also turned her head away, not daring to look at Lin Feng again. She felt like a child who had made a mistake. Hey, why am I a bad guy again? I just think my wife is beautiful. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and then he also smiled. Looking at Zhang Yuxi, there was also a hint of tenderness in his eyes. Puff. Are you flattering me again? Zhang Yuxi couldn't help but burst out laughing when she heard Lin Feng's words. When Lin Feng saw Zhang Yuxi's look, he also showed a silly smile. He couldn't help but touch his nose. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, do we need to flatter each other? What do you think? You were flattering me just now. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, and she also said with a sweet smile. Silly, how could I? I obviously didn't flatter you, I was obviously praising you. Everything I said was true. When Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words, he also quickly refuted. He also knew that Zhang Yuxi was teasing him, but he was also very happy to bicker with Zhang Yuxi, which was also a way for him and Zhang Yuxi to increase their relationship. Okay, I get it. Since you praised me for being beautiful, I'll praise you for being handsome. Zhang Yuxi smiled when she heard Lin Feng's words, and then she spoke. Okay, then I'll just bear with it. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile on his face, and then spoke. Can't you be more modest? Zhang Yuxi smiled and said. I'm just telling the truth. Am I not really handsome? Lin Feng heard Zhang Yuxi's words, and he also grinned with a smug look on his face and spoke. You are a cricket bee. Zhang Yuxi also looked at Lin Feng with a smile, and she immediately joked and spoke. Cricket. Hearing what Zhang Yuxi said, Lin Feng also looked at her with a puzzled look, but his eyebrows slightly frowned, and then he said again, Wife, you are getting more and more naughty. I learned that from you. I always tease me on purpose. Zhang Yuxi said with a playful wink. Wife, don't wrongly accuse me, I never tease you, I'm always trying to make you happy. Lin Feng frowned when he heard Zhang Yuxi's words, but he spoke seriously. It seems that he still likes to make Zhang Yuxi happy. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng's serious look, and she also smiled. She also thought of the scene when Lin Feng teased her before, and she couldn't help laughing. Lin Feng really liked to tease her sometimes. Zhang Yuxi smiled, then stretched out her hand and pinched Lin Feng's cheek, and said, "Yes, yes, my husband is the best, he always makes me happy." Lin Feng's cheek was pinched by Zhang Yuxi, and a bright smile appeared on his face. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and grinned, then said, "Well, it's good that you know. I know. You are the best, super invincible." Zhang Yuxi couldn't help but complain when she heard Lin Feng's words. She rolled her eyes at Lin Feng. Her heart was full of love for Lin Feng. A faint smile appeared on Lin Feng's face, and then he looked at Zhang Yuxi, and then stretched out his hand and gently touched Zhang Yuxi's head, and then said, "Wife, you are a little perfunctory." "How am I perfunctory?" Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words. She also widened her eyes, pretending to be surprised, and looked at Lin Feng and asked. There was also a cunning light in her eyes. "You still don't admit it, you are just perfunctory to me." Lin Feng also widened his eyes, and then he also spoke. "When did I perfunctory to you?" Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng with a face full of grievance, and then she spoke, and then she pouted her little mouth, pretending to look at Lin Feng with a pitiful face. "Ha ha 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 you." Lin Feng couldn't help laughing. Seeing Zhang Yuxi's aggrieved look, Lin Feng also laughed. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, and then stretched out his hand to pinch Zhang Yuxi's little face, and looked at Zhang Yuxi with a doting face and said, "I really can't do anything about you." He. Husband. Seeing Lin Feng's doting look on her, Zhang Yuxi also showed a sweet smile, and then she also put her arms around Lin Feng's arm and leaned her head on Lin Feng's shoulder. Her hands were also tightly holding Lin Feng's arm, and she leaned her little head on Lin Feng's shoulder. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's appearance, and he also smiled slightly. He was also very happy in his heart. Although he and Zhang Yuxi were already engaged, he still felt like he was marrying a wife, and the relationship between him and Zhang Yuxi seemed to be deeper. There was also a deep tacit understanding between the two. The two of them also looked at each other, and they also had a feeling of mutual appreciation, but neither of them said it out loud. They didn't need to say it out loud, because they knew that the relationship between the two was also getting deeper and deeper. Lin Feng also reached out and gently touched Zhang Yuxi's hair, and he also said, "Wife, why are you getting more and more naughty? What? Don't you like it?" When Zhang Yuxi heard what Lin Feng said, she pursed her lips and spoke coquettishly. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's coquettish look and couldn't help laughing. He thought Zhang Yuxi was very cute, and she was still acting coquettishly, so he felt very lucky. He felt that he was really lucky to have met Zhang Yuxi, and Zhang Yuxi was very good to him and loved him very much. Having such a good girlfriend is the proudest thing in his life. Chapter 1695. The Most Perfect Man. Ah. You don't like it, right? Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, who was laughing so happily, and continued to speak with a proud look on her face. After Zhang Yuxi finished speaking, she gently scratched Lin Feng's nose with her fingers, and looked at Lin Feng and pretended to be very angry. When Lin Feng heard what Zhang Yuxi said, he quickly shook his head and explained, No, of course I like it very much. I love my wife the most. And I also hope that my wife will always be so cute, naughty, charming, beautiful, kind, gentle, generous, and smart." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and couldn't help but praise her a few words. "Huh? You are so smooth talking. I've said all the words for you." Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and pouted her lips, and she also spoke. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and laughed. He also stretched out his hand and pinched Zhang Yuxi's nose, then smiled and said, "Wife, these words are not enough to fully describe you. In my heart, you are the best." "That's right, don't you look at whose wife you are? Lin Feng's wife." Hey. Zhang Yuxi was also happy when she heard Lin Feng's praise, and then she looked up at Lin Feng with her chest held high and laughed. "Yes, you are my wife, you are the best." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's proud look, and he couldn't help but smile and said. Lin Feng also opened his mouth and continued, "No matter what you do, you are the best. I also think that marrying you is the happiest thing in my life. I have always been grateful for my choice to have you. You are also the best. You are also the most perfect man in my mind." Zhang Yuxi was also shy when she heard Lin Feng's words. She also showed a shy expression on her face. However, her eyes looking at Lin Feng were full of tenderness, and she was full of admiration for Lin Feng. When Lin Feng saw Zhang Yuxi's shy look, he was also a little excited. He also reached out and gently stroked Zhang Yuxi's hair. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and smiled and said, "Wife, how perfect is it? Aren't you the most perfect?" When Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words, she looked up at Lin Feng with a serious expression on her face, and then said with a smile, "You are the most perfect man in my mind, my boyfriend, my fiancé, my husband." After Zhang Yuxi said this, the expression on her face became particularly serious. Looking at Zhang Yuxi's appearance, Lin Feng couldn't help laughing. He couldn't help but touch Zhang Yuxi's hair and said, "Wife, do you really think so?" "Of course, I think you are the most perfect man in the world, my husband. You are my man. You are handsome, good at studying, tall, capable and talented, and can make money, ha 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 ha. And the most important thing is to love your wife. With you, I am already a winner in life, okay?" Zhang Yuxi said with a happy smile. Hehe. Hearing Zhang Yuxi's words, Lin Feng's face also showed a bright smile. Lin Feng is indeed the most perfect man in the world. Whether it is identity, family background, education, ability, talent, etc., in the eyes of others, Lin Feng is also a very excellent and perfect person. But in his heart, he thinks Zhang Yuxi is the most perfect. Everything about Zhang Yuxi is very good. Zhang Yuxi is also the most perfect woman in the world in his heart, so Lin Feng is also the most perfect in Zhang Yuxi's heart. Zhang Yuxi saw Lin Feng laughing so happily, she also laughed, and then said, "Hubby, you are very charming when you laugh, very charming. The more I look at you, the more handsome you are. Wife, don't make fun of me, I am almost overwhelmed by your praise, ha 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 ha." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's appearance and couldn't help but laugh and said, his eyes flashing with a strange light when he looked at Zhang Yuxi. Zhang Yuxi also smiled when she heard Lin Feng's words. She looked at Lin Feng and couldn't help but reach out and touch his chin, then smiled and said, "Oh, I'm just telling the truth." When Lin Feng laughed, he was really very charming, and his smile alone could make many girls fall. Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng, she couldn't help but become a little crazy, and then looked at Lin Feng, she was also a little intoxicated. She felt that she didn't dare to open her eyes. She was afraid that she would not be able to see clearly once she opened her eyes, afraid of seeing things she didn't want to see, afraid of seeing a face she hated. Ha ha ha. Looking at Zhang Yuxi's appearance, Lin Feng also laughed. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with an extremely hot look. He also reached out his arms to hug Zhang Yuxi, holding her tightly in his arms, and then said, "Wife, you are so sweet. Since my husband is so outstanding, I must praise him more." Hearing Lin Feng's praise, Zhang Yuxi also spoke. She looked at Lin Feng with an extremely gentle look. After Zhang Yuxi finished speaking, she also put her head on Lin Feng's shoulder. She also put her face close to Lin Feng's shoulder, her cheek on Lin Feng's shoulder, feeling Lin Feng's body temperature. "I think I am the happiest person in the world now. Really super happy. Having you by my side is enough." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's actions, and he couldn't help but speak. Zhang Yuxi's eyes lit up when she heard Lin Feng's words. She also looked up at Lin Feng slightly, and she also said, "Really? That's really great, I think so too. I also think I am the happiest person in the world." After Zhang Yuxi finished speaking, she also began to act coquettishly to Lin Feng. She continued to lean her little head on Lin Feng's shoulder. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's actions, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He also hugged Zhang Yuxi tighter. He looked at Zhang Yuxi's actions and said with a smile, "Well, wife, I am really happy now, do you know?" "Yes, I know, of course I know you are very happy now, and your happiness is my happiness, of course I know." Zhang Yuxi said. She looked at Lin Feng, with a sweet smile on her face. Hearing Zhang Yuxi's words, Lin Feng also laughed. A bright smile appeared on his face. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, "Wife, you are so good, you are such a big fool, why do you believe me so much?" Chapter 1696 Life Partner. "I know, of course I believe you, my husband. I believe my eyes, I believe you are the best man in the world, and the best man. Of course I have to believe you, my husband, otherwise, how can I marry you in the future?" Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said with a smile. Hearing Zhang Yuxi's words, Lin Feng also said, "Well, I also hope that you can marry me earlier. I really want to marry you. Well, I hope so too. I'll look forward to that day. Zhang Yuxi nodded and said, her face was full of smiles. As Zhang Yuxi said, she also buried her face in Lin Feng's shoulder. She took a deep breath of the faint fragrance emanating from Lin Feng's body. Smelling this smell, Zhang Yuxi felt that her whole heart was softened. She was also deeply intoxicated by this breath. Lin Feng's body had a faint smell of cologne, and also had a unique breath. This breath was also intoxicating and made people feel particularly comfortable. Zhang Yuxi felt very enjoyable at this moment. She felt full of energy, and she was also very excited. She felt that her whole body was full of strength. Wife, when we are old enough to get married, I will give you a grand wedding immediately. I will do what I say. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said gently. Zhang Yuxi actually believed in Lin Feng very much, because as long as it came from Lin Feng's mouth, he would realize it one by one. It was never just talk. Okay, at that time, there will be many relatives and friends around us to bless us, and our wedding will definitely be very romantic. Hearing Lin Feng's words, Zhang Yuxi also spoke. She was also very much looking forward to it at this moment. She also thought about the scene of marrying Lin Feng, and she also imagined the scene of holding a grand wedding with Lin Feng. Well, it will definitely be very romantic, and our wedding will definitely be very beautiful. I will definitely make you the happiest and most beautiful bride in the world. I'm not just talking, I will definitely do it. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said with a smile. His laughter was very soft and full of magnetism. Hearing Lin Feng's words, Zhang Yuxi's face was also covered with a hint of sweet smile. Zhang Yuxi also said, well, I believe in my husband. Zhang Yuxi trusts Lin Feng 100%, because Lin Feng never makes empty promises, and he will fulfill everything he promises. Lin Feng is indeed a responsible man, and he always does what he says. Zhang Yuxi also believes in Lin Feng's promise, and she also believes that Lin Feng really loves her, so she also trusts Lin Feng very much, and she has always believed in Lin Feng. Hearing Zhang Yuxi's words, Lin Feng also showed a smile on his face. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, well, my wife's vision is right. I must be a man you can trust for life. Zhang Yuxi heard Lin Feng's words and she said, well, I know. I must be the luckiest woman in the world. Because I met you, I think this is a great fortune. I think this is a fortune that I will never forget in my life. I think this is the most wonderful decision I have ever made in my life. Now I think about it and feel very lucky. I think I am really a super happy person. Hearing Zhang Yuxi's words, Lin Feng also looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, well, wife, I am also very lucky because you are my wife. Yes. Zhang Yuxi also nodded. She also looked like a little bird, leaning on Lin Feng's shoulder. The two of them are also very affectionate at this moment. Both of them are very happy. Zhang Yuxi is also very happy at this moment. Although Lin Feng often said all kinds of sweet and heartwarming words to her, the care and actions shown by Lin Feng touched her very much and made her very warm. There was also a warm current flowing through her heart, and she felt very warm. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile on his face. A smile also appeared on his face at this moment. He looked at Zhang Yuxi and said, wife, you are really my good wife. I will be better to you and love you more in the future. Lin Feng also said. There was a firm look in his eyes. He also liked Zhang Yuxi very much. The degree of his love was also very deep. He really liked Zhang Yuxi. He also loved Zhang Yuxi very much. He thought Zhang Yuxi was the cutest, most beautiful and kindest girl in the world. Zhang Yuxi also looked at Lin Feng when she heard Lin Feng's words. She also nodded and said, well, I believe you too. You are also my good husband. Although the two of them have not officially held a wedding, but only got engaged, Lin Feng and Zhang Yuxi have long recognized each other as their life partners. The time they have been together is not actually very long, but they are already very familiar with each other. Since they have been together, they have had very close interactions. The two are also very loving. They have been together all the time. They have never quarreled or had any conflicts. Instead, they understand and tolerate each other. Lin Feng also feels that marrying Zhang Yuxi is a very correct choice. He also feels that marrying Zhang Yuxi is very meaningful. He also feels that he is very lucky to marry such a beautiful and gentle wife. This is also the happiest thing in his life. Well, I also believe that I can give you happiness and take care of you for your whole life. I also want you to be the happiest girl in the world. I always hope that you can be happy. Lin Feng said. He looked at Zhang Yuxi, and he was also very doting. He also treated Zhang Yuxi as his most precious baby. He also liked Zhang Yuxi very much. He also cherished Zhang Yuxi very much. He also hoped that he could give Zhang Yuxi more happiness. He also felt that Zhang Yuxi should be a happy girl. Yet, as long as I am happy, my husband will be happy too. Zhang Yuxi smiled and said when she heard Lin Feng's words. She was also very grateful and she was very moved. She felt that she could have such a happiness, and she was also very content. Lin Feng touched Zhang Yuxi's hair and said, well, I will be very happy too, because you are the sunshine in my life. You are my sunshine and the sun in my heart. You are the lamp that will always exist in my life. Yet, my husband has good literary talent. Zhang Yuxi also nodded slightly and teased with a smile. Chapter 1697 Romantic Allergy. You silly girl, you are allergic to romance, right? Lin Feng smiled and shook his head when he heard Zhang Yuxi's teasing. Haha, how did you know that? Zhang Yuxi also said with a smile. You are just naughty. I was talking so seriously just now, and you teased me. Silly wife. Lin Feng pinched Zhang Yuxi's face and said. Zhang Yuxi also looked at Lin Feng with a smile, and also reached out to hit Lin Feng's arm and said with a smile, oh, of course I know that I am my husband's light. Well, just like my husband, you are my light. Before I met you, my whole world was gray, but because of my husband's appearance, my whole person is shining. Zhang Yuxi said. Her playfulness and cuteness made people laugh. Seeing Zhang Yuxi so playful and cute, Lin Feng also said, okay, whatever you say is right, whatever my wife says is right. Yes. Zhang Yuxi nodded and said. Then, she approached Lin Feng, put her mouth close to Lin Feng's ear, and whispered, thank you, husband, for your tolerance of me all the time. Zhang Yuxi's voice was very gentle. Her voice was soft, like cotton candy, soft and sweet. Zhang Yuxi was leaning on Lin Feng's shoulder at this moment, and her whole body was leaning on Lin Feng's shoulder, and she was leaning next to Lin Feng's ear. She was also speaking softly, and her voice was also very sweet, and it also had a taste of temptation. Zhang Yuxi was speaking in an extremely gentle tone at this moment. Her voice was like a gust of wind blowing into Lin Feng's ears, making Lin Feng feel itchy in his ears, and his heart was very happy. Hearing Zhang Yuxi's words, Lin Feng also said, silly wife, why do you say thank you to me? I love you and I will tolerate everything you do. His eyes were also looking at Zhang Yuxi, and the friendship in his eyes was also very sincere and full of strong love. Zhang Yuxi was very moved when she heard Lin Feng's words. She nodded slightly, and her eyes were full of love. She looked at Lin Feng, rubbed his face and said, yeah, that's great. There was a hint of coquetry in her voice, and it was full of endless sweetness. It's great to have you by my side. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's kitten-like posture, and couldn't help pinching her little nose, saying with a smile. Hate it, you bad husband, you bully me, you pinch my nose. My nose collapsed and it's your fault. Zhang Yuxi was pinched on the nose by Lin Feng, and she pouted and said. Her lips pouted slightly, and she was full of a hint of sexiness and charm. She was also very moving, which made Lin Feng's heart beat faster. Haha, who told you to be so charming? I can't control myself. Lin Feng also looked at Zhang Yuxi and laughed and said. Zhang Yuxi's pretty face also turned red. She glared at Lin Feng and said, huh, you are a bad husband. Wife, your nose is straight, but your lips are also very pink and tender, making people want to take a bite. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi's lips, smiled evilly, and said. He now has an idea about Zhang Yuxi. Zhang Yuxi glared at him when she heard Lin Feng's words. She also stretched out her fair right hand to cover her lips, and her left hand also patted Lin Feng's chest, looking shy. You, how can you be so bad? Really a big bad guy. Zhang Yuxi saw Lin Feng looking at her, and her face immediately blushed. She said coquettishly. Wife, don't you think you are really beautiful? Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi with a smile in his eyes. He also looked at Zhang Yuxi very gently, and then said with a smile. Zhang Yuxi also looked up at Lin Feng. She saw that Lin Feng's eyes were very deep and gentle. She also looked into Lin Feng's eyes and said shyly, I'm fine. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, and the corners of his mouth slightly curved. Then he smiled and said, Wife, you are beautiful but you don't know it. Wife, do you know how moved I am when I see you? Even if I can see you every day, I still can't help but look at you. Wife, you are like a poppy, which fascinates me. You are not only beautiful, but also have a good personality. I like you very much and am very obsessed with you. Lin Feng also stared at Zhang Yuxi's eyes and said. Zhang Yuxi's face changed when she heard Lin Feng's praise. However, there was still a hint of blush on her face. She also said, "Oh, you make me embarrassed. Haha, even if my wife blushes, she is still so beautiful, so pretty, and so charming." Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi, with a hint of obsession in his eyes, and said. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with deep love in his eyes. It seemed that he really loved Zhang Yuxi. Hey, husband, your mouth is like honey, so sweet. Zhang Yuxi also covered her mouth and laughed. She was very happy to hear Lin Feng's praise. Wife, just admit that you are beautiful. Anyway, you are my woman. Lin Feng looked at Zhang Yuxi and said with a smile. He looked at Zhang Yuxi with a domineering look. Zhang Yuxi was very happy to see Lin Feng's domineering look. She looked at Lin Feng and pouted her lips and said, "Oh, domineering man. Haha, wife, don't you like it? Wife, do you like my domineering look?" Lin Feng's mouth corners slightly raised, smiled evilly, and said, "Yeah, I like it very much, very handsome." Zhang Yuxi looked at Lin Feng and said with a smile. There was also a trace of love in her eyes. She also liked her man very much, especially when she saw Lin Feng's domineering look. She liked this man even more. Seeing Zhang Yuxi so happy, Lin Feng also had a little bit of pride in his heart. He also said, "Wife, I am not only domineering, I am also very romantic and very gentle." Zhang Yuxi smiled and nodded when she heard Lin Feng's words. With a happy arc on the corner of her mouth, she said, "Yeah, you are indeed very romantic and gentle. Wife, do you really like romantic and gentle men?" Hearing Zhang Yuxi praising himself, Lin Feng was also a little excited. He also looked at Zhang Yuxi and asked, "Yeah, of course I like it. I like romantic and gentle men. And I like men who pamper me very much. Look at you, it's just like you, so I love you the most." Zhang Yuxi also smiled when she heard Lin Feng's words. There was also a teasing look in her eyes. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.